Chapter 772. Something happened. That was the first thought in Jiang Wang's mind. The Green Cloud Pavilion was in trouble. That was the second thought in Jiang Wang's mind. The enemy that the Green Cloud Pavilion was facing was strong, at least strong enough to instantly kill the outer building Qi Lu. Based on his observations during this period of time, there were only 5 outer building experts in the entire Green Cloud Pavilion. However, one of them died right away. The situation wasn't optimistic at all. Third, there was no third. Jiang Wang turned around and ran. He didn't need to and didn't want to risk his life for the Green Cloud Pavilion. From start to finish, he only had one goal, which was the lost building of the cloud-top celestial palace. He didn't know who the enemy was and didn't know who the enemies of the Green Cloud Pavilion were, what things they coveted, who they hated. He had no way to guess. However, he was able to come to a simple conclusion. Such a dangerous and chaotic night had, in truth, wiped out all obstacles for him to sneak into the forbidden land of the Green Cloud Pavilion. The danger that the Green Cloud Pavilion faced was an opportunity for him. At such a crucial moment of the sect's life and death, who would care about what was going on in the Forbidden Land? Even if they noticed, who would care? Of course, as the current disciple of the Green Cloud Pavilion, Yu Songhai wouldn't let the enemies of the Green Cloud Pavilion off. At this moment, he was also in danger. However, if he calmly analyzed the situation, he would understand. If he fled now, he would undoubtedly face the fiercest attacks of the enemy, which was the most dangerous. Qi Lu's death was proof. The enemy hiding in the dark was obviously prepared and was just waiting for the right time. Coincidentally, he saw Qi Lu fly away, which was why he acted in advance and killed Zhong Shou. Even an outer building expert died so easily. Jiang Wang didn't think that his body would be much stronger. Going to the forbidden land of the Green Cloud Pavilion was to search for the lost building of the cloud-top celestial palace and also to avoid the most dangerous moment. If the Green Cloud Pavilion was destined to be destroyed today, he needed to try his best to escape. The best time would be when the Green Cloud Pavilion launched their fiercest counterattack. He had already planned out the route and only needed to follow the set path, which is why he fled. He kept a low profile and moved swiftly in the dark night, leaving all the noise and pain behind him. Lord Zhong Shou, the Green Cloud Pavilion disciple who saw Qi Lu fall, exclaimed loudly, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Enemy!" The screams stopped abruptly. He should be dead. However, a new call sign immediately sounded. Then came a new scream. He didn't know how many enemies had come, but it seemed like something had happened in several directions. The rumbling of Taoist techniques, the sounds of intense counterattacks, Azure Cloud Pavilion disciples. Listen up. 5 people in a group, get into formation on the spot. Lean on each other and don't panic. Purge the enemy. The voice of the Emerald Cloud Pavilion's sect master, Qi Dingfeng, reverberated loudly and gradually faded away. Jiang Wang, who was moving swiftly, noticed that the huge, snow-colored light shield that was condensing in the air and covering the Green Cloud Pavilion's mountain gate only paused for a moment before it shattered with a loud bang. Looking at the flowing light filling the sky, it was extremely poignant. That was a sign that the Azure Cloud Pavilion's sect-protecting array was activated in a hurry, but it was also targeted and broken. The Azure Cloud Pavilion was finished. It was obvious that the invading enemy was well prepared, and even the sect protection formation was broken at the first moment. This was a devastating blow to the morale of the Azure Cloud Pavilion disciples. Furthermore, Jiang Wang suddenly thought that the strongest combat power in the entire Shun and Prefecture, the Divine Descent Realm expert Marquis Waning Jiao Wu, was coincidentally not in Shun and Prefecture at this time. In other words, no one could save the Azure Cloud Pavilion in a short period of time. Did the invading enemy choose to make a move today because they were waiting for this opportunity? With a heart full of guesses, as well as unavoidable nervousness and uneasiness, Jiang Wang turned around and already saw the Azure Cloud Pavilion's great ancestral hall. The official name of this ancestral hall was the Temple of Good Fortune and Azure Cloud, where the memorial tablets of the Azure Cloud Pavilion sect masters were enshrined. The Azure Cloud Pavilion, disciples usually called it the Great Ancestral Hall, to distinguish it from the other small ancestral halls in the Mountain Gate. The Great Ancestral Hall usually prohibited disciples from entering, and it was only open to worship once in the first month of every year. When Jiang Wang joined the Azure Cloud Pavilion, the open worship had already ended, and he had never been able to enter this place. With his experience in the Ethereal Hall, Jiang Wang had a great reason to believe that the Great Ancestral Hall was the most likely place to hide the lost building of the Cloud-Top Immortal Palace. The Great Ancestral Hall was guarded by a team of law enforcement disciples all year round. With Jiang Wang's current strength, there was basically no problem in getting rid of them. However, he did not rashly kill them, and instead waited quietly in the shadows for a while. The killing in front of the Mountain Gate became more and more intense. Soon, the law enforcement disciples guarding in front of the Great Ancestral Hall all flew out and rushed to the front mountain to join in the battle to defend the Mountain Gate. If the Mountain Gate collapsed, what was the use of guarding the Great Ancestral Hall? Jiang Wang no longer hesitated and rushed into the Great Ancestral Hall. Baiyun Child. Jiang Wang summoned the white and fat Baiyun Child out of the 5 prefectures sea and ordered him to search for the lost building of the Cloud-Top Immortal Palace and find the Azure Cloud Pavilion that was hidden somewhere. Baiyun Child held a small sword made of clouds in one hand and made a hand seal with the other. He assumed a posture and shuttled back and forth among the memorial tablets of the Azure Cloud Pavilion sect masters. Jiang Wang also used his eyesight to carefully examine every corner of this ancient ancestral hall. This was not like the last time in the Ethereal Hall, where he could slowly search. The Azure Cloud Pavilion might not be able to hold out for long before it fell, and time was very tight. Did you find it? Jiang Wang observed the possible hidden doors while asking anxiously. Wu. Baiyun Child took in a deep breath. Under Jiang Wang's expectant gaze, he slowly shook his head. There doesn't seem to be one here. Jiang Wang, if there isn't one, then what are you thinking about? Silently remembering the slap, Jiang Wang used the Samadhi True Fire to burn through a wall. After confirming that there was no hidden door, he decisively left and dashed to the next location. Great Ancestral Hall, Sect Head Building, the core courtyard of the Feng and Qi bloodlines. These were the few places that Jiang Wang felt had the highest chance of hiding the lost building of the Cloud-Top Immortal Palace. Apart from the Azure Cloud Pavilion, Jiang Wang had already thought of ways to investigate the other places. These few places were all in the back mountain, and the Sect Head Building was at the core of the back mountain, where the Azure Cloud Pavilion Sect Head cultivated. Only Zhong Shou had the right to enter and visit. Apart from that, even Feng Ming, who was from the Feng bloodline, had no chance to enter. For a new disciple like Yu Songhai, under normal circumstances, it was even more impossible. It had a high chance of hiding the lost building of the Cloud-Top Immortal Palace. When Jiang Wang rushed here, the place was already empty. The Mountain Gate was about to be destroyed, and the sect head had already gone to the front gate to defend. Naturally, he wouldn't leave anyone to guard the building. However, the entire sect head building was covered by a snow-colored light. It should be from the same source as the sect protecting formation of the Azure Cloud Pavilion, but it maintained its independence. After the sect protecting formation collapsed, it still stubbornly defended the sect head building. Jiang Wang didn't hesitate to get up, not bothering to hide his movements anymore. Secret Treasure Star Flame, open. Fire Source Totem, open. Within the first inner residence, the fiery red seed spun. He was already in front of the sect head building, pressing down with his palm. Samadhi True Fire. Chapter 773. Pung. When the snow-colored light covering the sect head building was destroyed, it gave out a low sound. Maybe some people noticed it, but who would care about the Qingyun Pavilion cultivators who were in fear? There weren't many enemies who truly attacked the Qingyun Pavilion. There were even only 4 of them, but each one of them was extremely terrifying. A fat man held a steel knife in his hand, but he didn't use it to slash people. He just charged around. The people he bumped into, be it heaven-reaching realm or soaring dragon realm, even inner house realm, they all died right away. Dense attacks landed on his body, causing his flesh and blood to fly. It made him look really vicious, roaring out furiously to vent his pain. However, the truly terrifying thing was the spellcasters who were bombarding him all died inexplicably after their Taoist techniques landed. They either bled from their 7 orifices, their heads were separated, or their flesh and blood disintegrated. Zhong Shou Feng Yi stiffened on the spot after using a strong spell on this fat man, bleeding from his 7 orifices and dying. In the end, the fat man who was covered in injuries charged around the Qingyan Pavilion mountain gate, but no one dared to block in front of him, and no one dared to attack him. He pretty much chased after the cultivators in the mountain alone. He screamed out. The people who were being chased were all scared out of their wits. A woman wearing a faceless mask, her actions weird, her body like a ghost. She moved left and right. Every time she appeared, a cultivator would die. They couldn't catch her, couldn't escape, and couldn't dodge her. She was like the Dark Knight, easily covering death. A teen with blood-colored eyes, holding a short dagger. Every time he killed someone, he would gouge out their heart. Many Qingyun Pavilion disciples were shocked by his blood energy and killing intent. Before they even fought, they collapsed. The one who looked the most normal was a thin man. He didn't have any terrifying actions. But it was this person who blocked sect head Qi Dingfang, making him unable to care about anything else. The entire Qingyun Pavilion mountain gate was surrounded by a ghost fog formation. Within the thick black fog, the cries of ghosts spread out. Those Qingyun Pavilion cultivators who ran into the fog in panic didn't come out in the end. The Azure Cloud Pavilion was not made of clay or wood. It was impossible for them to wait for the enemy to set up a formation outside the mountain gate. Therefore, the energy fluctuations of the ghost fog array were not that strong. It was probably just a temporary setup using array disks, and the grade of the array disks was not too high. In fact, as long as an outer building realm powerhouse made a move, it would be enough to break it. However, the people who attacked the Azure Cloud Pavilion immediately targeted the experts from the outer tower of the Azure Cloud Pavilion. Zhong Shou, Qi Lu, and Feng Yi both died in battle. The only person who wasn't surnamed Zhong Shou, Zhang Yulio, was being chased up and down by the fat man and didn't have the energy to care about anything else. The remaining Zhong Shou and Feng, you could only organize the sect disciples to bitterly hold on. Looking at the battle in the mountain gate, it wasn't an evenly matched battle at all, but a bloody massacre. Just the 4 of them surrounded and killed the entire Azure Cloud Pavilion. With one strike, Jiang Wang broke through the light shield protecting the sovereign building and stepped into the core area of the Azure Cloud Pavilion. The killing of the outside world had nothing to do with him. He and Baiyun Boy were just searching for the lost building of the cloud-top celestial palace. He didn't care about the ancient and elegant layout of the building, those dazzling artifacts, Tao essence stones, those cultivation methods and books. He only wanted the Azure Cloud Pavilion. The entire sect head building had 3 floors, each more exquisite than the last. However, after searching all 3 floors, he still didn't find anything. Baiyun Boy was still confused and didn't sense the aura of the lost building. Jiang Wang confirmed that he had searched every corner and even found the secret room. The cultivation techniques and magic tools stored in the sect master's building were indeed worth guarding to the death. However, the lost building of the cloud-top celestial palace was indeed nowhere to be found. Was the lost building with the same name as the Azure Cloud Pavilion already lost in history? Jiang Wang didn't allow himself to be confused and frustrated. He decisively left the sect head building and headed towards the next location in his plan. He was sure that the Azure Cloud Pavilion wasn't lost. The once famous cloud-top celestial palace definitely had some methods to protect the possibility of it reviving. The spiritual space hall had moved several times and didn't lose the building. The Azure Cloud Pavilion shouldn't have been lost. If it wasn't here, it had to be somewhere else. If the lost building of the Azure Cloud Pavilion was still there, it couldn't escape Baiyun Boy's perception and resist the attraction of the cloud-top celestial palace. Then, only the core courtyards of the Feng and Qi lineages were left. Jiang Wang sensed the battle at the front mountain from afar and estimated how much time he had left while flying in the air. The Feng and Qi lineages each had a core courtyard at the Azure Cloud Pavilion Mountain Gate, representing the glorious history of the two lineages. However, only after becoming the sect head could one move into the courtyard. Therefore, one of the two courtyards was always empty. After living in the Azure Cloud Pavilion for more than half a month, Jiang Wang was already familiar with the terrain. He went straight in and barged into the empty courtyard at the fastest speed. This was the core courtyard of the Feng family. It occupied a wide area and had a simple layout. However, just as he pushed open the door, he saw a familiar figure turning around in panic. Feng Ming. It seemed that he had just hidden here. His expression was panicked, and his aura was chaotic. Songhai. Seeing Jiang Wang, he sighed in relief. You also escaped? Then he panicked again. What do we do? There's a large formation outside. It seems that we can't escape. We might all die this time. Didn't you go to the front lines? Jiang Wang frowned. I just finished discussing with my father. I still need time to smooth things over. Let's not talk about this. Feng Ming panted heavily. Songhai, you have an idea. What do we do now? If he and Feng had already left, they might have been killed on the way. Just like Qi Lu. Thinking about it this way, he didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse that they hadn't left. Now that we're in this situation, we can only do what we can. I can only do my best and leave the rest to fate. Jiang Wang shook his head. What can I do? No. Feng Ming seemed to have grasped at his life-saving straw and became excited. You're not simple. I know you're not simple. He took a few steps towards Jiang Wang and even begged in his voice. Seeing that I've treated you well, don't run away by yourself. Songhai, help me. Take me away. How could there be a fool in this world? Even Feng Ming, a young master who had experienced many vicissitudes of life and bragged about himself, wasn't as impulsive and childish as he often appeared. Yu Songhai was using him. Wasn't he also using Yu Songhai? From the time he'd met Jiang Wang until now, all he'd done was recommend Jiang Wang to enter the Azure Cloud Pavilion. But with Jiang Wang's help, his influence grew day by day. He was increasingly valued by Feng Yu and the other elders. Thinking about it, it really wasn't a loss. Jiang Wang didn't say a word. He walked around him and went inside. Time was tight. He just wanted to get to the Azure Cloud Pavilion quickly and find a chance to escape. He didn't have time to continue talking to Feng Ming. You came to the Azure Cloud Pavilion with a purpose, right? Feng Ming suddenly shouted behind him. You're secretly looking for something, right? What do you want? I can help you, as long as you save me. He'd really underestimated him. Jiang Wang suddenly turned around. How can you help me? Chapter 774. People who always treated others as fools were often the biggest fools themselves. Who said that Feng Ming was stupid? When Qi Lu said that a person like Yu Songhai shouldn't be below Feng Ming, the pride in Jiang Wang's bones actually approved of it. He had never looked down on Feng Ming, but he had to admit that he had never really thought that Feng Ming was that capable. Like everyone else, he had indeed underestimated Feng Ming. He had led Feng Ming to various places in the Azure Cloud Pavilion all day long, thinking that it was flawless. However, Feng Ming had long suspected that he had ulterior motives, but he had always restrained himself. He was playing with Feng Ming, but wasn't Feng Ming acting with him as well? Now that he spoke, he went straight to the core of the problem. Jiang Wang could no longer ignore him and had to see his value. It's been a long time since you came here. You must have gone to the Ancestral Hall to look for something, right? You also looked for the Sect Master's building? You didn't find it, right? Feng Ming said faintly. No wonder it was said that those who know others are wise, and those who know themselves are wise. It was difficult to know oneself, but it was also difficult to know others. Jiang Wang reflected in his heart, but he glanced in the direction of the mountain in front of him. They were at the back of the mountain, but the sounds of battle in front of the mountain gate had gradually spread over. This meant that the fighting spirit of the mountain guards of the Azure Cloud Pavilion had already collapsed, and they were being forced to retreat again and again. There's not much time left. He turned back and reminded Feng Ming. Less than 10 people know where the real secret storehouse of the Azure Cloud Pavilion is. Feng Ming took out a strangely shaped key from the storage box. And the key is with me. Do you think I can help you? This key was strangely shaped because it was actually in the shape of a pavilion. It was slender, but the cornices were carved clearly. And the cloud-top immortal palace in Jiang Wang's body reacted almost immediately. The lost building of the cloud-top immortal palace was actually made into a key. The azure cloud pavilion that Jiang Wang had been searching for was actually in Feng Ming's hands. Too interesting. Feng Ming thought that what Jiang Wang wanted was in the so-called real secret storehouse of the azure cloud pavilion, but he did not know that the key in his hands was what Jiang Wang was determined to get. One can wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find it by chance. You can indeed help me, Jiang Wang said in a relaxed tone. Feng Ming vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he didn't know what the problem was. He only cautiously took a step back. Don't try anything funny. Even if you get the key, you won't know where the secret vault is, let alone how to open it. But Jiang Wang had already flown up. Feng Ming did not doubt that he was no match for Yu Songhai, who had hidden his strength so deeply. That was why his first reaction was to threaten and state the stakes. Unexpectedly, this Yu Songhai did not hesitate at all and directly came to fight for it. His first thought was to use his power to destroy the key in his hand, but then he thought about it. This key was very important to Songhai. It was something that could save his life, so it couldn't be destroyed so easily. It was because of this momentary lapse in thought that he was one step too slow. The Astray God was perfectly used at this moment. Jiang Wang grabbed him and pinned him down firmly on the spot. He easily took the key from Feng Ming's hand. Qi Yu, who was far stronger than Feng Ming, could not take more than a few blows from Jiang Wang on Mount Qiyun. Not to mention that the current Jiang Wang was much stronger than Mount Qiyun. They were both in the inner palace, but Feng Ming could not even take one blow from Jiang Wang. When the key was in his hand, it was naturally summoned by the cloud-top immortal palace and fell into the five-palace sea. Jiang Wang loosened his grip and let go of Feng Ming. Think of a way to escape. Before Feng Ming could react, the key in his hand was lost, and the mysterious Yu Songhai had already turned around. He stilled and then chased after him, shouting, "Don't go, don't go. I'll tell you where the secret vault is, and the treasures in the secret vault are all yours. As long as you save me. You can't find it. You can't find a secret vault yourself, Songhai." He was desperately trying to find a reason to save his life, and he kept yelling, "Songhai, we've been together every day for more than half a month. I've taken you everywhere. Even if I didn't do anything, I worked hard. There should be some friendship. Take me with you and escape." Jiang Wang stopped in his tracks. He shook his head seriously. "I can't do it." Then he stepped into the night, leaving behind only these cold words. He left Feng Ming with endless despair. This was very cold, but what he said was only a fact. Feng Ming saw him as a life-saving straw, but he did not have enough confidence to escape himself. How could he take Feng Ming with him? In the dark night of the Azure Cloud Pavilion, Jiang Wang silently put on the invisibility cloak. Feng Ming's last words had moved him, but only at the stage of being moved. He could not do it, so he could not do it. He had no responsibility or obligation to save Feng Ming. He had never been friends with Feng Ming. What kind of friendship was what kind of things would be done? If it was easy, he would not mind helping Feng Ming out of kindness. But this kind of situation, he would not put himself in a difficult situation for Feng Ming. If it was an Du Yahu or Cheng Gung Sheng who were trapped here, he would risk his life to save them. There was no trade-off to speak of, but this was Feng Ming. They had never truly shared their hearts and had never exchanged sincerity. Think of a way to escape. This was the only advice Jiang Wang could give. In the five-residence sea, the cloud-top immortal palace rumbled. The azure cloud pavilion descended from sky. Like the ethereal palace and the cloud pavilion, it landed in the ruins of the cloud-top immortal palace and naturally merged with them. At this point, the three known lost buildings of the cloud-top immortal palace had all returned. The ethereal palace provided the cloud-top immortal palace with an endless supply of primordial qi. The cloud pavilion sat in the center and unified the entire cloud-top immortal palace. It made this dilapidated ruin truly have the skeleton of the cloud-top immortal palace. And what could the Azure Cloud Pavilion bring? In the entire Azure Cloud Pavilion, Feng Ming was not the only one in despair. Feng Yu, who was good at dealing with people, after a long period of planning, dodging many open and hidden attacks, could pretty much lock onto the position of the next sect leader. Just as he was feeling proud of his life, a terrifying enemy attacked him. He was good at negotiating, good at trading, and knew how to compromise. But none of the people who attacked the Azure Cloud Pavilion were normal, and none of them could be communicated with. There was no negotiation, no trade, no compromise. They came to wipe out the Azure Cloud Pavilion Mountain Gate, which was why Feng Yu, who was good at taking a step back, went all out. Because he had no other choice. Feng Yu was not the only one who realized this point. From the moment they were attacked until now, Qi Dingfeng was commanding and fighting at the front. One could say that he had shown the ability and responsibility of a sect leader. But the gap in strength was too obvious. Even the weakest blood-eyed man was at the inner house realm. They were all at the outer house realm, but Zhongsho was no match for those people. If Feng Yu did not have the help of the disciples, he would have died to that woman. Zhang Yuliu, who was not surnamed Zhong, had lost his courage and didn't even have the courage to fight back. He only cared about escaping, and being killed was just a matter of time. That fat man's weird ability was too terrifying. If he didn't bother, he would be smashed to death by him. If he attacked him, he would die mysteriously. He thought about everything, but he didn't know how to solve it. Was the Azure Cloud Pavilion, which had a long history, going to die today in the hands of Qi Dingfeng? No. Qi Dingfeng suddenly hollered in rage. He wasn't willing to be like this, and he wasn't willing to become the center of the Azure Cloud Pavilion. The four starlight Saint Pavilions resonated in the sky. A dark color flowed like water, surging out from a mysterious place, gathering and covering the moon. He raised his hands up, his messy hair spread out, his face was pitch black, and he hollered in rage. I use my soul to sacrifice to this calamity. Chapter 775. Some people were unlucky when they were born, unable to hear and unable to speak. Some people were dumb and ignorant, not knowing the seasons. Some people's parents died, and they were all alone. Some people were walking on the road, but died on a horse. Some people carefully passed through the forest, but died to snakes and insects. Unlucky, unlucky. There were so many unlucky things in the world, and so many unlucky people. The power of the forbidden technique surged. Dark clouds, thicker than ink, covered the color of the moon. It was like despair, blocking off hope. It was a ball of darkness, a patch of fear. It was illusionary, but also real. It had existed in the past and would continue to exist in the future. Everyone who saw it felt like their future was dark and their chances of survival were slim. It was like today was their death day, their death day. This was a calamity, a calamity. The most painful misfortune was about to descend on them. The ancestral hall of the Green Cloud Pavilion was known as the Good Fortune Green Cloud Temple. The forbidden technique of the Green Cloud Pavilion flipped good fortune, causing calamity to cover one's head, entangling evil debts, and gathering dark clouds. With Qi Dingfeng's strength, he wasn't able to activate this technique. He wanted to sacrifice his own soul, using calamity to create calamity, using calamity to raise calamity. He first caused calamity for himself before causing calamity for others. He used the fiercest forbidden technique to open up a path for the Green Cloud Pavilion. At that moment, the cultivators of the Green Cloud Pavilion, from Zhongsho to the disciples, were all moved. Even someone like Feng Yu, who was really shrewd, couldn't help but turn red. No matter how they competed, the Feng and Qi factions were connected. He had spent many years with Qi Dingfeng and was clear about the fierceness of this forbidden technique. He could understand Qi Dingfeng's choice more and more. When the Green Cloud Pavilion was facing a calamity, Qi Dingfeng showed the responsibility of a sect leader, standing in front of the mountain, using his body to die for the sect. The calamity clouds hung above the thin enemy, drawing energy from the darkness, flipping fortune and lifespan, messing up one's fate. Qi Dingfang's fingers moved crazily. His body was burning, his soul slowly disappearing. The dark clouds gathered and calamity was about to descend, just as the forbidden technique was about to be completed. Among the enemies, the thinnest one who looked the most ordinary suddenly shouted, "I don't want to play anymore." His voice was sharp and hurried. He was like a child venting his anger. It was as if the extermination battle was nonsense, and the life and death battle was child's play. If he said he wasn't going to play, then he wasn't going to play. Even if he was powerful, his words were too childish. No one cared about the weight of this sentence. Only Qi Dingfang's Tao energy surged faster. His emotions were more intense, and his soul was dissipating faster. Only he, who had been fighting with the skinny man all this time, knew that the skinny man's terrifying strength was unfathomable. Otherwise, why would he have to sacrifice himself and rely on a forbidden secret technique to break out of this situation? But other people's emotions and feelings were never in Li Laoxi's consideration. Other than third brother, no one could truly influence him. In the face of the calamitous dark clouds that shrouded the Qi Ji, and in the face of the desperate struggle of a cultivator from the fourth-level outer sect, he felt threatened, so he stopped playing. That was all. He reached out with his right hand and casually grabbed, immediately snatching a long saber from the hands of an Azure Cloud Pavilion cultivator. A cold light flashed. He reversed the blade and chopped off his own neck. With the saber in his hand, he didn't hurt anyone but hurt himself instead. He wasn't putting on a show, acting, or bluffing. With a slash of the saber, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. This slash was so ruthless that it directly cut through more than half of it, as if it was completely aimed at decapitation. The cold blade separated the flesh and stopped in the middle of Li Laoxi's neck. But he didn't show any signs of pain. Instead, he grinned. Opposite him, without any warning, Qi Dingfang's entire head suddenly flew off. The headless corpse crashed to the ground, and the calamitous dark clouds that had already formed in the sky and were about to descend instantly dissipated after losing the control and support of the caster. The stars were sparse, and the moon was bright on the horizon. The dark clouds had already disappeared, but the clear moonlight shone down, causing the hearts of the Azure Cloud Pavilion cultivators to turn cold. Qi Dingfang's struggle, Qi Dingfang's commitment, and Qi Dingfang's desperation. It was meaningless. At this moment, many pieces of information in their minds suddenly connected. Tong Gui's mystical ability. Feng Yu's face was filled with fear. "You are Skinny Li." Skinny Li, the flesh-slicing demon. He turned his head and looked at the fat man holding the steel saber. "Then you are..." He finally understood what this person's weird ability was. His voice couldn't help but tremble. 10,000 evil human demon. Or rather, this terrifying guess had always existed, but he wasn't willing to believe it, didn't dare to believe it. And now, he had to believe it. Skinny Li had already pulled out his saber. The way he pulled out the saber was like when one was chopping firewood and accidentally sunk in, and then pulled it out. He treated his neck as a piece of wood, pulling with all his strength, not bothering about whether it would hurt or not, even if the people who saw this felt pain. He hung in the air, casually tossing the saber aside. Closing his fingers, he tightly covered the gruesome wound on his neck. Fresh blood surged out from the gaps of his fingers, dyeing his entire palm red. His tone was filled with dissatisfaction. "Third brother, why is it that I am the one showing off my strength, but he seems to be more afraid of you?" "Ha ha." Zheng Laosan had already grabbed onto the only person of the Azure Cloud Pavilion who wasn't surnamed Zhongshou. While he was struggling in fear, he directly smashed his head down. Pung! Like a watermelon exploding. Red and white splattered, warm and hot, covering his face. Zheng Laosan casually tossed away Zhang Yulio's dog-like corpse, laughing out loud. "If not, why would I be your third brother?" he said. "Oi!" Skinny Li held his neck and flew towards Feng Yu. not bothering about his wariness and the Azure Cloud Pavilion's disciples behind him. "Why are you more afraid of my third brother?" he asked. Following the deaths of Qi Ding Feng and Zhang Yulio, the chances of Azure Cloud Pavilion winning were totally destroyed. Such a smart person like Feng, you obviously knew that the situation was already over. But Skinny Lee's pointless question made him see hope once more. He realized that the notorious flesh-gutter ogre and all fiends ogre had different temperaments from ordinary people. They had a naive cruelty, and this naivety itself could be used. Feng Yu forcefully swallowed his saliva, allowing his fear to be shown more clearly, hoping to make the other party more satisfied. His voice trembled as he said, "Actually, I am very afraid, but when all of you appear together, I am more afraid. No, not all of you." Zheng Lao-san had already shouted from afar. "You must be most afraid of one person." He took large strides towards this side, with an aura of wanting to kill anyone at any time. "Speak. Who are you most afraid of?" "That's right," Li Laosi also agreed. "Two-faced people are the most detestable." Cold sweat instantly dripped down Feng Yu's forehead. He realized that no matter which side he sided with, he would offend the other person. And between these two people, no matter who he offended, he would die. Naive also meant that they might not necessarily follow anyone's thinking, but had their own direct logic of actions. Smart people's thinking and choices might not affect them at all. The sophistry he was good at, the fawning, the currying favor, were all meaningless. What to do? What to do? Actually, Feng Yu deliberated. Stop fooling around. Serious matters are more important. A female voice suddenly sounded, temporarily stopping the torture Feng Yu was enduring. The faceless masked woman with a ghostly figure stopped in her tracks, standing high in the sky, her back facing the moon, facing the mountain gate. Her voice roared, like waves rolling across. "The sect leader of the Qingyun Pavilion has died. This is the result of resisting. The Qingyun Pavilion has been wiped out. There is no point in fleeing. In the world, I am least afraid of killing people. I have a rule, I will tell you all. From now on, those who hold weapons die. Those who use techniques die. Those who move die. Those who make a sound without permission die." She said the word "die" in such a firm and decisive manner, filled with killing intent. The fierce aura that belonged to her was released without any reservation, instantly occupying the mountain gate, suppressing the cultivators of the Qingyun Pavilion who had lost their backbone. Dang Lang, weapons fell to the ground. The higher-ups of the Qingyun Pavilion, one sect leader and 4 Zhongsho, only one was left. The only remaining Zhongsho and Feng Yu gave up on resisting. Their spines were broken, and their courage was broken. This faceless masked woman was truly ferocious and ruthless. When she said those rules, her tone and aura didn't seem like she was trying to scare anyone, but just to find a comfortable reason to kill. No one could question her determination to kill. Their fighting spirit, which was on the verge of collapsing, totally collapsed. The night wind blew. It was a night of killing under the bright moon. There was still a tragic cry that sounded out in the suddenly silent Qingyun Pavilion mountain gate. It was really abrupt. The faceless masked woman turned her head and looked over. The blood-eyed man who had just pulled out his hand from the chest of the cultivator opposite him explained. He just moved. He was holding a complete and bloody heart in his hand. The woman didn't do anything to him, turning her head and continuing to speak viciously, controlling the situation. "Very good. It seems like we have reached an initial consensus." Her tone was cold and solemn. "You all need to know to be afraid, but not too afraid, because I won't kill all of you." "Oi!" At that moment, Zheng Lao-san suddenly shouted toward her, saying seriously, "We are not playing. This matter is really important." "What matter?" The woman who understood them naturally knew that Zheng Fei, this idiot, was talking about who was scarier between him and Li Laosi. This damn fatty was replying what she said before. "Stop playing. Serious matters are more important." What kind of brain was that? The aura she worked so hard to build was broken just like that. The woman was about to explode. But being angry with this fellow, what was there to be angry about? It wasn't the first day that she knew they were idiots. Resisting the urge to take off her mask, the woman took in a deep breath, making herself ignore these few idiot teammates who couldn't do anything right. She continued to shout, "Now, listen to every word I say, because it concerns your life and safety." She slowly shifted her gaze from left to right, making sure that everyone could feel her deterrence. Then she said, "The surname Fong and Chi people step out. You are temporarily safe." Chapter 776. Under the night sky, the mountain gate of the Qingyun Pavilion was totally silent. An extremely oppressive silence. No one spoke and no one moved. It was like no one dared to believe that the people who stood out would be safe. Who would believe the promise of a human demon? Who would dare to believe? The woman wearing the faceless mask placed her hands on her hips, seemingly very satisfied with the current atmosphere. The more uneasy and fearful they were, the more satisfied she was. "I like that you all don't listen because I can kill more people," she said with a lively tone. "Then how about this? I will count to 3. When I count to 3, if no one stands out, I will start killing again. One by one. Who dies first and who dies later will depend on luck. No matter if you are willing or not, it's decided." She clapped her hands and directly started to count 1, 2. I am a disciple with the surname Chi. Before she finished counting to 3, someone couldn't take the pressure and stood out. His voice unknowingly became weaker due to fear. "My surname is Chi. Very good." The woman seemed very happy. "Stand over here." She stretched out her finger and drew a circle in the air. "Everyone with the surname Fong and Chi, stand over here. Be quick. I have a mission for you all. Don't be afraid." "What are you afraid of?" she said. "If I wanted to kill you all, why would I pick you out? Isn't that right?" This sentence had more normal logic and was much more convincing. Instantly, 4 more people stood out. Out of these 4, one of them was the only remaining higher-up of the Qingyun Pavilion, Zhongshou Fengyu. He didn't want to be the first one to test the risks, but after judging the situation, he immediately acted. In a bad situation, he made the best choice. His action led the way, and 7 to 8 disciples of the Feng and Qi bloodlines walked out. However, more people were still hesitating and struggling. "You." The woman looked left and right, pointing at Fengyu. "I heard them call you. You are Qingyun Pavilion Zhongshou, right?" "Yes, yes, yes." Fengyu nodded his head obediently, showing his obedience. "I am also surnamed Feng." "Very good." The woman nodded her head once again to show her approval. Her voice also became much gentler. "I think you know everyone in the Qingyun Pavilion." I do. Fengyu said confidently. "I'm very familiar with it." "Huh. It couldn't be any better." Among the disciples of the Feng and Qi surnames, some of them are very shy. "I don't want to look for them myself. It's too hard. If a woman works too hard, it's easy for her to age." The woman changed the topic for a while, then suddenly returned to the topic. "Can you help me point them out? I'm going to do something big, and I need their help. But we don't have enough people." Feng Yu's reply was resolute and decisive. "Please rest assured. Leave this matter to me." The tragic state of the sect destruction did not seem to affect his mood at all. Just like in the Marquis Wei Ning's estate, just like many times in the past, he did not cherish his pride. Life was more precious than those cheap emotions. He had understood this principle a long time ago. He walked into the crowd. You. He pointed out all the cultivators of the Feng and Qi lineages one by one, completely ignoring those sincere or resentful gazes. He was very clear about whose mood was important and whose mood was not. "Sir Zhongshou." Just as he was choosing from the crowd, a teen stared at him darkly. "This fairy wants all the disciples of the Feng and Qi lineages. Where's your son?" This teen's expression was furious, his eyes dark. It was obvious that he had deep feelings for the sect and despised his actions. He had a lot of courage and hatred, using words as a dagger to stab at him. "Fairy?" Before Fengyu replied, the woman wearing the faceless mask suddenly smiled. "This teen's mouth is really sweet. Come. She waved her hand. "Come to sister." This was a young man with a handsome appearance. and he was surprised and bewildered when he heard this. Originally, because he was displeased and enraged, he relied on a surge of courage that came out of nowhere to seize the opportunity to express his resentment towards Feng Yu and wanted to drag Feng Yu's son down with him. So many cultivators died in battle. So many people were waiting here for judgment, but his son was nowhere to be seen and hid far away. He didn't expect that the word fairy would attract the attention of the female demon. The heavens took pity on him. He didn't have any thoughts. But he couldn't just open his mouth and say that female demon, right? He was terrified, but he didn't dare to be disobedient, so he could only slowly walk over. However, no matter how long the road was, there would be a time when it was finished. He finally walked in front of the female demon. The woman wearing the faceless mask looked at him carefully, like she was picking goods. Then she pulled him behind her. "Stay here. Sister will take care of you." The teen only felt his entire body relax for a moment. The fear that had been suppressing in his heart shifted, and his heartbeat slowed down. It seemed like he was safe. For some reason, he didn't hate Feng Yu anymore. Seeing this person gain the favor of the female demon so easily, the other disciples present couldn't help but be tempted. Bowing down was humiliating, but compared to their lives, Lady Goddess actually have something to say as well. A male disciple ran over, his face full of smiles. All the compliments he could think of in his life surged up his throat. But he was only halfway there. "Katja!" The woman wearing the faceless mask had already twisted his head, leaving the corpse to wither weakly. She sneered. "You're so ugly, yet you dare to tease me." Her figure swayed, and she stood back to her original position, saying slowly, "Those who can sweet-talk are talents. Those who learn to sweet-talk are idiots. Men must be somewhat unique. Those who blindly follow suit are annoying this old lady for no reason." A few of the more handsome male disciples immediately retracted their feet. This female demon was temperamental. The risk of trying to get close to her was too great. Feng Yu was called to pick the disciples of the Feng and Qi factions. Zheng Fei and Li Liangzi didn't fight over who was scarier. Each of them squatted at one side and watched this woman with interest. From time to time, they would whisper to each other, happily discussing something. What a casual conversation. They were just short of holding a bowl and chopsticks in their hands. On the other hand, the blood-eyed teen was still standing alone. He didn't speak, nor did he have any expression, but the heart in his hand was already gone. The faceless mask was even more terrifying in this kind of night. But the woman's voice was gentle. She turned to look at the young man behind her. "You're still the best. You're much better than them. What's your name?" "Liang. Liang 9. Another fellow disciple was easily killed in front of his eyes, like a chicken being slaughtered, unable to resist at all. The young man trembled, but still mustered up his courage and said, "Big Sister Fairy, how should I address you?" "She's called Yinzi." Zheng Fei suddenly answered. Good name. Liang 9 didn't know what was so good about this name. In Wenxi County, if he called her Yinzi, there would be hundreds of people responding. But there was nothing wrong with his sweet mouth. "Don't call me that." Yinzi looked at him. "Just call me Big Sister." "Okay, Big Sister." Liang 9 quickly responded. "Good boy." Yinzi seemed to smile, then turned to face Feng Yu. "My little Yi asked you a question. Why didn't you answer?" Feng Yu wasn't nervous at all. Instead, he looked at Liang 9 calmly and asked curiously, "My Ming'er has always been good friends with you. You should know that he went to the front lines to wait for orders under Marquis Wei Ning. Were you too nervous and scared just now, so you forgot?" When the mountain gate sounded the alarm, he judged that the situation wasn't optimistic, so he immediately gave the key to the secret storehouse to Feng Ming and told him to hide. Before the disaster, they had discussed how to join the front lines and join Marquis Wei Ning for a long time. He was sure that no one had seen Feng Ming, so he dared to lie in front of so many people. Furthermore, he wasn't explaining to the she-devil called Swallow. He was asking Liang 9 directly. This added to the credibility of his words. If Liang 9 was smart, he would take advantage of the situation and say that he had indeed forgotten. That way, the matter would be settled smoothly. Because if the she-devil asked him where Feng Ming was, he wouldn't be able to answer, and it would be more dangerous. Also, he casually mentioned Marquis Wei Ning and didn't purposely rely on him, so it wouldn't cause the other party to dislike him. But if he was someone who considered Marquis Wei Ning, he wouldn't have overlooked this point. Just this simple sentence was enough to show his shrewdness and shrewdness. It should be said that under the current situation, he had already done his best to deal with it. But he had overestimated Liang Nine's courage. The woman called Yanzi only turned her head, but before she could speak, Liang Nine immediately said, "I don't know. He didn't tell me. I'm telling the truth." It might be a military secret, so the higher-ups didn't allow him to say. Feng Yu calmly continued. When he went to the front lines, he was in a hurry. Impossible. The man with the blood-red eyes suddenly said, "I've been standing guard at the foot of the mountain. No one will leave alive today." Then, Yanzi asked Liang Nine, "Did you see his son yesterday?" Liang Nine didn't hesitate and didn't dare to hesitate. He only said, "I saw him. TSK, TSK, TSK. Yanzi turned her head and looked at Feng Yu, her voice cold. "You dare to lie to me? I can explain." Feng Yu immediately said, "Maybe this or didn't notice, but the situation was urgent, so my son secretly came from the back of the mountain." But his explanation came to an abrupt end. His eyes were wide open, filled with blood vessels, and he gasped for breath. The star tower in the distant sky gradually extinguished, the 5 palaces in his body collapsed, and Tong Tian Palace completely collapsed. He still had countless excuses at his fingertips, countless perfect reasons, but he couldn't say any of them. Yanzi retracted her hand from his head. "I hate these damn men's explanations the most," she said angrily. "They always talk for so long, but they never get to the main point. You think that they wrote a long article, but after reading it, it's like a fart." P.S. Title from Yen Shu's Breaking the Formation. Yanzi comes to the new society. The pear blossoms fall behind the Qingming. Chapter 777. Jiang Wang, who had sneaked back to the front of the mountain, was already shocked. Flesh-slicing, human demon? 10,000 fiends, human demon? Zheng Laosan? Li Laosi? The 2 clowns he hung upside down on the tree. Are they the most ferocious of the 9 human demons? The heart-devouring demonic bear asked. He had a deep impression of the shadow of death that had left him with a deep impression. His expression had changed when he heard the name of the 9 human demons. He had also paid attention to the evil deeds of the 9 human demons. Demons were the enemies of humans. The 9 human demons were called human demons. Naturally, they had all committed grave sins and deserved to die 100 times. There was also this terrifying woman called Yanzi. Her cultivation was only in the outer tower, but she killed Feng Yu like killing a chicken. Her actions were so fast that not only did Feng Yu not react, but he also didn't see it clearly. Now that he was so close, Jiang Wang didn't dare to move. Concealment was ineffective against divine descent experts. Although these human demons weren't divine descent experts, they were still absolute experts in the outer tower. When he was moving in Xian City, Dong A had already detected him. He wasn't sure if these people would discover him. The ghost fog outside the mountain hadn't dispersed. He wasn't sure if he could shake off these human demons after breaking through the ghost fog array. He could only freeze on the spot, suppress the intense emotions in his heart, and quietly observe the situation. What shocked him the most was actually the blood-eyed young man. He was obviously one of the human demons, but his appearance was clearly Maplewood City's Fong Pengju's cousin, Fong Helling. Jiang Wang was sure that he remembered correctly. Not much time had passed, and he had interacted with Fong Helling many times. How could he not recognize him? But Fong Helling, how did he become a human demon? Didn't he join the Whitebone Path? If it was a misunderstanding back then, and he didn't join the Whitebone Path, he should have died in Maplewood City. What was going on now? Jiang Wang divided his attention, paying attention to the situation on the battlefield and the changes in the 5 prefectures sea. After the Azure Cloud Pavilion landed in the Cloud Top Immortal Palace, the changes were still ongoing. In the 5 prefectures sea, the return of the 3 lost buildings allowed the Cloud Top Immortal Palace to recover a bit of its past glory. The Cloud Pavilion was majestic, the ethereal palace, and the Azure Cloud Pavilion stood in the front area. The ancient pavilion stood proudly in the ruins. When it was finally unified by the Cloud Pavilion and Cloud Top Immortal Palace's aura, a miraculous change took place. Let's fly. Child White Cloud stepped on the clouds and flew among the immortal palaces. The Snow White Cloud Pavilion's feet started Cloud Top Immortal Palace. Beneath the ruins of the Cloud Top Immortal Palace, the layer of clouds that floated above the 5 prefectures sea also had faint green clouds spreading out. At the same time, mysterious information appeared in Jiang Wang's mind through the connection between the Immortal Master and the Cloud Top Immortal Palace. It was unprecedentedly magnificent and fantastical, grand and vast, ever-changing and resplendent. It was as if the door to a whole new world had been opened in front of Jiang Wang. This kind of understanding, it was the 9 great immortal palaces that used to run amok in the world. Yanzi killed Feng, you casually in front of the empty space. It was as natural as going out to buy groceries. She turned around and looked at Liang Nine. Don't explain it to me in the future, okay? It seemed that she really hated men's explanations. Liang Nine was stunned and answered in a panic. Okay, good boy. Yanzi reached out and touched his face. Can you help me find the people from the Feng and Qi branches? Liang Nine pursed his lips and lowered his head. Okay, he was one of the outstanding disciples of the Azure Cloud Pavilion. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been familiar with Feng Yu. He was naturally familiar with the cultivators of the Feng and Qi lineages in the sect. At this moment, he was walking among the crowd. His gaze was evasive, and he did not dare to make eye contact with anyone. However, he pointed out the people he knew one by one. There were all kinds of looks in the crowd. Some were angry, some were disdainful, and some were begging. However, no one dared to say anything or do anything. They were all scared out of their wits and had lost their will to fight. Even the sect master Qi Dingfang's desperate attempt did not cause the slightest ripple. Even if these people really did something, what was the point? If the tree moved, it was only because of the wind. It had nothing to do with Tao Wu's desperate shake. This reality was placed in front of everyone. It caused everyone to be depressed and pained. The crowd was silent. Only those who were pointed out by Liang Nine didn't dare to hesitate and walked out. Even a nest of chicks knew to pounce and peck when they were captured by humans. But it was precisely because these transcendent cultivators had all their hopes extinguished that they couldn't even compare to Chicky. Feng Helling, who had a pair of bloodshot eyes, walked to Feng Yu's corpse and squatted down. He gently dug into the corpse's chest and plucked out the still cold heart. He looked at the heart strangely for a long time. Then he asked, "Your son, where is he hiding?" The heart in his hand suddenly exploded. Feng Helling seemed to have gotten his answer. He stood up and looked at Yanzi. "I'll go get him." Yanzi didn't say anything. She just quietly looked at Liang Nine. The invisible pressure made it difficult for Liang Nine to walk, but he still walked forward. Gradually, more and more people stood in the open space. All the cultivators from the Feng and Qi families were gathered in the open space. Men and women were squeezed together. The disciples of the 2 families who were usually proud and arrogant were now like monkeys in a cage. They were anxious and didn't know what kind of fate they were about to face. That demoness said she wanted to gather them to do something. Hopefully, it was really just to do something. Normal people wouldn't believe the words of the demonic man. However, they had no other choice. Finally, Liang Nine walked back to Yanzi. "I found him." "Good, you did well." Yanzi gently said to him, "Don't be afraid. I will protect you." Zheng Fei. She turned her head and shouted at the 1,000-fiend demonic man, squat further away. "You're scaring little Nine." Zheng Fei rolled his eyes and stopped muttering to Skinny Lee. He obediently moved his butt. "No, it's fine. He didn't scare me." Liang Nine quickly said, "You're so sensible." Yanzi was as gentle as water. She gently said, "When we went up the mountain, we didn't communicate properly and accidentally killed a lot of people. There should be disciples of the Feng and Qi families among them, right? Help me find their corpses and pile them up here. Okay? Liang Nine didn't have any room to refuse. He didn't have the courage to refuse. Okay. He could only say, "You guys." Yanzi casually pointed at a few cultivators from the Azure Cloud Pavilion who weren't chosen. Listen to Nine's orders. Carry whoever he tells you to carry. Understand? Thus, these cultivators followed Liang Nine to carry the corpses. When all the corpses of the Feng and Qi families were piled up in the open space, Feng Helling also carried the struggling Feng Ming over. Let me go, let me go. Feng Ming kept trembling. What do you want? What do you want? However, Feng Helling didn't respond to him. He didn't stop him either. He only carried him and walked forward. Every step he took was like stepping on the sound of his heartbeat. Chapter 778. When Feng Helling threw the person in his hand into the empty space, the horror story turned to the next chapter. Is it all here? Yanzi asked Liang Nine. The pitiful Azure Cloud Pavilion disciple thought for a while before saying, "There are a few corpses that I can't recognize. Those that I can recognize are all here." He did not dare to make a single mistake. He did not dare to say anything wrong. "Aya, you poor thing." Yanzi touched his face. "You don't have to be so nervous. Sister won't hurt you." "I'm not nervous. I'm nervous." Liang Nine's trembling voice was not very convincing, but Yanzi did not pursue the matter. She turned to look at 10,000 fiends. "What are you waiting for? You don't care about your own matters. Are you waiting for me to feed you?" Zheng Fei was not angry at her bad attitude. Instead, he chuckled and said politely, "Thank you for your hard work." Skinny Lee also said, "Thank you." Zheng Fei changed from a squatting position to a standing position. He stood up like a mountain of meat. He strode to the front of the empty space and reached into his belt, pulling out a large square cauldron. With the popularization of the Mahis Sect storage box, the storage belt was a relatively ancient item. Very few people used it now. There were very few left in the world. But compared to the storage belt, the aura of the cauldron was more ancient. It was taken out from the storage belt, but it looked like it was taken out from a dark warehouse. It was covered in dust and an ancient story that no one listened to. It made people want to sneeze. Dong! The cauldron fell and hit the ground heavily. The mountain's response was a long, muffled sound. It was more than 10 feet tall and had the same length and width. It had 4 legs and 2 ears. It was square and very symmetrical. There were yang characters on the cauldron. The words were very similar to Dao characters. Although it could not reach the meaning, it was not hard to recognize. But the words used were obscure. It seemed to be an ancient prayer. This yang character was not the language of the Yang Kingdom. It was the words that were protruding from the cauldron. Zheng Fei did not speak. He picked up a corpse and threw it into the cauldron. The cauldron was not unfathomable. But when an adult who was not thin was thrown in, there was no sound at all. However, a blood-red flame suddenly rose from the bottom of the cauldron. The cultivators of the Feng and Qi lineages who were gathered together instantly felt their fear rise to the peak. These human devils actually wanted to cook people for food, fight them to the death. His shout was cut off halfway as the flesh-slicing demon grabbed him by the neck and tossed him into the cauldron. The entire process was extremely natural. "Whoever resists will die first," he said indifferently. The swallow stretched out its hands and pressed down. Her hands were not sinister and bloody. Instead, they were very beautiful. They were slender and tender, fair and rosy. "What did I say at the beginning? He said he needed your help with something, right?" She faced the cultivators of the Feng and Qi lineages. The mask without any facial features couldn't reveal her expression, but her body language, her voice, her aura, they all explained her indifference. "Now, I might as well tell you what this matter is. Do you know? Your Azure Cloud Pavilion has a treasure, a very big treasure." She turned around and touched Liang Nine's face. "Of course, I'm not talking about my little Nine." Liang Nine was like a clay puppet, not moving at all and not saying a word. He always felt that he wasn't weaker than Shi Yu and was much stronger than Feng Ming. It was only because he didn't belong to the Feng and Qi lineages that he didn't receive the support of the sect, and couldn't obtain the best resources. He had no hope of becoming the sect leader, and the best future he could have was a position that didn't have the surname Show. He wasn't willing, wasn't convinced, and was annoyed by this unfair world. His heart had been filled with frustration for a long time, which was why he purposely asked Feng Ming when Feng Yu was begging for mercy. If Feng Yu found people with the surname Feng and Qi, then he would let his son Feng Ming die too. If he could escape, then he would let Feng Ming live too. He wanted to let Feng Ming, who was born with a good life, experience fairness. However, after personally witnessing the scene of these human devils using the cauldron to cook people, he didn't know whether or not he would ask if he could do it again. At least at this moment, he didn't want to stand behind this female demon. The swallow looked around and retracted her gaze in boredom. No one here was in the mood to care about her teasing. Thus, she continued, "What I want is the blood of balance in your bodies. You don't need to know what it is. You only need to know that it is a method left behind by a certain power in the ancient times. In the past few years, it allowed the Feng and Qi lineages to maintain a balance. It controls your future and, to a certain extent, your destiny. In your bodies, it is so ordinary. But to them," the swallow pointed at Zheng Fei and Skinny Li, "it will play a crucial role. Unfortunately, this method has been lost. Only your green cloud pavilion has the blood of balance." The swallow's tone was filled with regret. "Thus, we had no choice but to come and hurt you. Even though I don't want to make my little Nine sad." She had just met Liang Nine today, but she seemed to have put in a lot of feelings for him. Her emotions were sincere. Jiang Wang, who was hiding at the side, was shocked. He had guessed the reason why the Feng and Qi lineages were able to maintain a balance, but he didn't have enough clues. Combined with what the she-devil was saying, it should be some kind of secret technique left behind by the Cloud-Top Immortal Palace. It allowed the blood of balance to flow in the Feng and Qi lineage's cultivators. To a certain extent, it ensured that they had a certain amount of strength. It also made corresponding restrictions so that this balance could continue. Jiang Wang didn't know what effect this blood of balance could have on Zheng Fei and Skinny Li. But just from the literal meaning of it, Skinny Li's ability to injure himself and Zheng Fei's ability to injure his opponent could be balanced through this so-called blood of balance. Wouldn't it be unsolvable? Anyone who became their opponent would die if they hurt them. If they hurt themselves, they would also die. Other than running away as soon as they saw them, what other choice did they have? Jiang Wang couldn't think of any way to solve this problem. "But I only need 2 drops, the swallow continued. Like a little girl, her tone became excited, "So maybe you don't have to die too much. This cauldron is very useful. We spent a lot to get it. It can help us achieve our goal. I also don't know how many people are needed to cook 2 drops of the blood of balance. They may need to cook 10 people, or they may only cook 2. We are very reasonable. We started with the corpses, didn't we? If we finish cooking the corpses, we have the blood of balance. We don't need to cook the people who are still alive. Isn't that a happy ending? But if someone wants to run away and cause trouble for us, then I'm sorry, they will die now. Yes, we are very reasonable." Skinny Li agreed. But then again, the swallow spread her hands, looking very helpless. "If the corpses are not enough after cooking, we can only slowly add people. Everyone can understand, right? When the time comes, we will see who is unlucky. What do you think?" Among the silent Feng and Qi cultivators, even Feng Ming, who couldn't move, closed his mouth. No one wanted to be the first to die. Everyone also hoped that they could be the last to live. They clenched their fists, but in the end, they still loosened them. It was useless. It was useless to resist. From the beginning until now, the human devils had used their strength to repeatedly emphasize this fact. So no one resisted. If you don't speak, it means you agree. The swallow clapped her hands. Continue. Chapter 779. So he continued. He continued to be horrified and in pain. Zheng Fei never cared about these things. He only cared about fun and happiness. But the old man asked Swallow to help, so he could only let Swallow help, because he couldn't be happy if he died. He strode around the open space, casually picking up corpses one by one and easily throwing them into the cauldron. He was casual and natural, as if he was cooking and adding a few pieces of pork to the pot. Simply throwing corpses was too boring. So he began to throw them left, right, around. He changed all kinds of tricks. Of course, they would all fall into the cauldron in the end. That cauldron was never full. The blood-colored flames burned fiercely, and the air was filled with a suffocating smell. It might be burnt, fishy, or some other pungent smell that was mixed together sinisterly. But after sniffing carefully, that smell didn't exist. It seemed to only exist in fantasy, in fear. The cultivators of the seal and pool lineages looked at the big cauldron in fear and pleading, hoping that the so-called blood of balance would be refined immediately, so that they could be pulled out of the abyss of despair. Even if it was their fellow disciples, blood relatives, or good friends. In short, hurry up. Let this nightmare pass as soon as possible. Skinny Lee didn't speak, and Fong Helling was also silent. This kind of night was suddenly a bit too quiet. Swallow didn't like this kind of silence. So she suddenly turned her head and looked at the other cultivators of the Azure Cloud Pavilion and pool lineages. You are safe. You are very happy. But happiness doesn't fall from the sky. It needs to be paid and protected. She said, now I'll give you a mission. Help me watch the cultivators of the seal and pool lineages and don't let them escape. As long as one of them escapes, 2 of you will die. Very fair, right? She clapped her hands crisply. It's decided. The cultivators of other surnames present were about 4 times more than the cultivators of the seal and pool lineages. They were originally scattered around, throwing away their weapons and dispersing their Taoist techniques. They didn't dare to resist or escape. They were only waiting for this group of demonic humans to achieve their goal and let them go. They had sympathy, sadness, and joy in their hearts. They sympathized with their fellow disciples who had to suffer this misfortune. They were also glad that they didn't have to. But as soon as Swallow said this, the atmosphere immediately changed. They were pulled back into the game from their temporary outsider status. There was no discussion, no communication, but there was a silent, tacit understanding. They naturally spread out and silently surrounded the cultivators of the seal and pool lineages in the open space. Many wild beasts, driven by their instinctive desire to survive, would eat their companions. It wasn't that there weren't any brave cultivators in the Azure Cloud Pavilion, but those brave cultivators had already been killed and wouldn't have survived until now. This demoness, named Yanzi, seemed to have a kind of innate viciousness. She enjoyed the pain and ugliness of people in desperate situations. This kind of evil was even more profound. Jiang Wang held the sword, feeling the strong, killing intent in his heart. These people were not fit to be called humans. They had no bottom line at all. They were even more demonic than demons. But reason firmly suppressed his impulse. Even if his current strength had reached a new peak, facing these 4 human devils would only result in his death. Regardless of whether it was 10,000 evil, cut meat, or this swallow, he was not confident. Within the 5 resident seas, the green clouds beneath the cloud apex immortal palace gradually gathered. Fate was always cruel. Or it could be said that there were always people creating cruel fates. The corpses of the cultivators belonging to the seal and pool lineages finally fell into the cauldron and were silently cooked. That so-called blood of balance still had no trace of taking shape. It meant that the hope of the cultivators of the seal and pool lineages who were still alive was dashed. They were going to be cooked alive. Yinzi looked at them coldly. She had already made a statement in advance. Everyone should have reached a consensus. She used her cold gaze to emphasize to everyone, don't challenge the agreement. Fear spread in the hearts of all the cultivators of the seal and pool lineages, but no one stood up to resist. Resisting would definitely lead to death, but not resisting seemed possible to live. There were no fools. The smart people made the smart choice. So Zheng Fei reached out and grabbed. A female cultivator suddenly raised her arm, seemingly instinctively wanting to fight back. But before she could make a second move, her arm was grabbed and directly thrown into the cauldron. There were no screams, no howls. The living person who fell into the cauldron was silent. Only the blood-colored flame under the cauldron seemed to be a bit brighter. Zhang Fei tilted his head. The diviner said today was a good opportunity. The dark clouds hid the moon, and the immortal palace lost its secret. So it was true. There really isn't anything strange that could stop us. He. Skinny Lee also laughed. He's the strangest, so after he finished his divination, there was nothing strange. Zhang Fei laughed loudly. No one knew what he was laughing about. Whether it was about the Azure Cloud Pavilion or that diviner, these words did not seem funny at all. In the past, the Azure Cloud Pavilion had always been able to survive due to various reasons. Those who were observant discovered that its inheritance was protected by a mysterious power. And the mysterious diviner had divined that the power related to the cloud-top immortal palace had dissipated today. The result was exactly the same. It was as expected. The two of them always had their own happiness. Yanzi gently stroked Liang Nine's face. Her movements were gentle, and her voice was sorrowful. The Azure Cloud Pavilion is destined to die today. My poor little Nine carries a blood feud. He might not be able to love me properly. No. Liang Nine nervously swallowed his saliva and quickly denied it. I have never been treated fairly in the Azure Cloud Pavilion. As a disciple of another surname, I have been discriminated against. I hate this place, he said. Sigh. Yanzi suddenly thought of something and said briskly, Who has discriminated against you in the past? Find him now. Sister will help you vent your anger. Okay? Let's cook him first. Liang Nine was stunned. Silly child. Yanzi rubbed his head and laughed again. Skinny Lee looked at Zhang Fei, then at Yanzi and Liang Nine. He seemed to be conflicted about which side was more interesting. Zhang Fei took large strides and went to catch the next person. It was still very easy, catching people and throwing them into the cauldron. The cauldron fire burned brightly, but there was no smell of meat. The immortal palace lost its secrets. The Azure Cloud Pavilion was destined to die today, combining these theories. Jiang Wang could not help but think. Was it because he had taken away the lost building that the mysterious power that allowed the Azure Cloud Pavilion to continue lost its effect? Otherwise, everything would not be so coincidental. That power, what was it? Did that diviner predict that he would take away the Azure Cloud Pavilion today? The clues in the unseen world, the mysterious and unpredictable fate, to him, was a completely foreign domain. He could not sense it, and he could not touch it. He could only silently watch, silently suffer, and also wait. The Azure Cloud Pavilion returned to the cloud-top immortal palace and brought him a celestial technique. The people of the immortal palace might think that celestial techniques were above the times and above all techniques, and they did indeed preach this. For example, this celestial technique opened with suppressing all ages, the secret of the immortal palace. But to Jiang Wang, the celestial technique system was still within the framework of the Taoist technique system. Of course, after all, the 9 great immortal palaces had once dominated the world. The power of celestial techniques was generally stronger than most Taoist techniques. It was different from Taoist techniques, which were mostly released with seals and formed from primordial qi. There was an important prerequisite for the use of celestial techniques. It needed the technique interface. The interface was between the two. The technique interface was the bridge between the technique and the person. At this moment, the green clouds below the cloud-top immortal palace were the technique interface of the celestial technique that Jiang Wang had learned. It was brought to him by the Azure Cloud Pavilion after it returned to its original position. In other words, the original purpose of the Azure Cloud Pavilion was to provide the technique interface for this celestial technique. Just like how the ethereal hall absorbed primordial qi from an unknown place, the Azure Cloud Pavilion was connected to a certain place that Jiang Wang did not know and could not pry into. He could only wait for the technique interface to take shape, wait for the technique interface to be enough to support the celestial technique. Then, he might be able to create an opportunity, or he might not. Everything was unknown. He saw that the cultivators of the Azure Cloud Pavilion were divided into two groups. One group was lined up like livestock waiting to be slaughtered, while the other group was supervising their fellow disciples and watching them die as livestock. In the past, they might have loved each other, but in desperate times, they could only kill each other. It was ugly, sinister, and tragic. He saw Feng Ming, whose hands and feet were restrained, trembling on the ground. This rich young master who used to talk big in the past lost his father and destroyed his sect overnight. He went from not lacking anything to having nothing. He had also become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Jiang Wang did not want to think about it, but that voice seemed to still ring in his ears. Songhai, take me with you and escape. Under the cloud-top immortal palace, more and more green clouds gathered. Jiang Wang remembered that he had lived here for more than half a month. Although he had other motives, most of the people here had unknowingly accepted him. Perhaps the Azure Cloud Pavilion had never held back from him, but they had indeed accommodated him for a short period of time. Here, some people were at odds with him, and some people were chatting happily with him. Some people fawned over him, some people made things difficult for him, some people bribed him, some people discussed swordsmanship with him, and some people wanted to adopt him as their son. The cultivators of the Azure Cloud Pavilion were the same as most people in this world. Not many of them were evil to the point of oozing pus, and not many of them were pure and kind. They were good and bad. There were times when they were kind, and there were also times when they were dominated by evil thoughts. They had also fought for power and profit, and they had also truly loved each other. They did not deserve to die. The Azure Cloud Pavilion had also not done anything wrong that deserved to be exterminated. If good and evil were not repaid, there would definitely be private interests in the universe. Jiang Wang was wearing an invisibility cloak. He hid in the dark, motionless, and felt the formation of the technique interface. He could remain silent. He could continue to remain silent. These human devils had not discovered him yet, and it would be difficult for them to discover him in the future. As long as he remained silent, he could completely wait for these human devils to leave before leaving safely. He also had many reasons that made him need to be safe. He still had a great revenge to take, brothers and friends waiting for him, and the cute Jiang Anan to take care of. He could find 10,000 reasons. But no. Chapter 780. The 5 prefecture seas were shaking. The cloud-top immortal palace was shaking. The fat cloud child was so excited that his face was red. The blue clouds under the immortal palace finally took shape. Who's next? Zheng Fei walked among the crowd and asked in a low voice. Who's next? Skinny Li echoed. Everyone he saw avoided his gaze. Zheng Fei chuckled. Suddenly, he looked down at Feng Ming, who had been thrown to the ground. How about you? He said. No, I'm not suitable. Feng Ming's eyes widened in fear, but he couldn't move. Do you think he's suitable? Yanzi turned and asked Liang Nine. Liang Nine lowered his head. I don't know. Zheng Fei obviously didn't care if he was suitable or not, or if he was afraid. Instead, he smiled even more brightly and walked closer to him. Among the cultivators of the Feng and Qi factions standing near Feng Ming, there were his friends and blood relatives, but they all silently moved aside. They gave him enough space. They allowed Zheng Fei to come closer. That fat figure, shrouded in the aura of death, approached in an irresistible manner. Feng Ming completely collapsed. Father, father. He even started to cry. Where are you? Save me, father. But no one would ever respond to him again. His father, who had always protected him and given him the best conditions and opportunities within his means, had already died before him. Damn trash, shut up. For some reason, the blood-eyed human devil was enraged. He suddenly charged over, the dagger in his hand glinting coldly. His expression was ferocious and savage. Shut up, he growled. The thousand-fiend human devil slowed down. It looked like he didn't intend to stop him. Feng Ming might first die at the hands of the human devil, then be cooked in the cauldron. Should he be honored that 2 human devils killed an ordinary cultivator like him? There was no answer to this question, because at this moment, Jiang Wang moved. He took off his concealment cloak and walked out of his hiding place. His posture was so ordinary, his steps so gentle. However, with each step, a blue cloud mark would appear and scatter in the air. He was clearly walking on flat ground, but in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Feng Ming. Too fast, too sudden. Who is it? You're courting death. When Xinmo Fong He Ling turned his dagger around, evil devil man Zheng Fei suddenly stepped forward and stretched out his hand. Jiang Wang picked up Feng Ming, who was still crying, and turned around again. The green clouds scattered, and in an instant, they were hundreds of feet in the air. Stepping on high altitudes was like stepping on flat ground. Why would it be difficult to ascend to the heavens? Immortal technique, meteoric rise. Yanzi released her hand from Liang Nine's shoulder and stood up. Li Shou laughed strangely and chased after Yin Xiao with a single step. Jiang Wang took another step forward. The specks of green clouds dissipated, and he had already bumped into the fog shrouding the green cloud pavilion's mountain gate. Bang! Flames suddenly rose. The raging true Samadhi fire burst out, directly annihilating the unpleasant ghost cry and burning the black fog into the air, clarifying the heavens and the earth, restoring the beautiful night. The ghost fog formation that enveloped the entrance of the azure cloud pavilion instantly dispersed. "Run for your life!" Jiang Wang shouted loudly and took a few steps. The green clouds scattered, and his figure was already far away. The cultivators of the azure cloud pavilion who were still in the mountain gate, the cultivators of the Feng and Qi lineages who could only wait for death, instantly dispersed. Of those cultivators with other surnames, some turned and ran, some were stunned on the spot, and some even tried to stop the cultivators of the two lineages. Because the human devils said that if one of the cultivators of the Feng and Qi lineages ran away, two of the cultivators with other surnames would die. Evil devil man Zheng Fei's figure rose into the air, and with a turn of the steel blade in his hand, a sharp blade mark immediately circled around the azure cloud pavilion's mountain gate. The ground cracked, and huge rocks were broken. A huge and clear ravine surrounded the entire azure cloud pavilion's mountain gate. "This line," he fiercely shouted, "whoever leaves will die." Li Shou could not catch up to Jiang Wang, and also turned around. "Let's see who can run." When Cinemo Fong He Ling was silent, and only caught up to the azure cloud pavilion cultivator who ran the furthest, cutting his neck and gouging out his heart and liver. Hearing Jiang Wang's shouts, the swallow gave up the chase. It directly turned in the air, and like a ghost, circled around the azure cloud pavilion's mountain gate. Bang! Leaving behind 4 corpses, the 4 combined into one sound and smashed to the ground. Everything was quiet. The chaotic scene was immediately fixed, as if there was a huge, invisible palm, slapping everything back to its original position. The ghost fog formation had already dispersed, and unexpectedly, none of the hundreds of azure cloud pavilion cultivators in the mountain gate ran away. Clearly, if they scattered and flew away, no matter how fierce these 4 human devils were, they could not stop all of them. At least half of them could escape. But in reality, not a single person escaped. The last chance to escape that Jiang Wang risked his life to create for them passed away so mercilessly. Sometimes, what imprisoned people was not the restriction of the body, but the prison of the heart. "Toys." Zheng Fei turned around and asked Li Shou. "Seems like it." Li Shou nodded. Zheng Fei grinned. "That's fun. Hurry up and cook the blood," the swallow reminded. Zheng Fei turned his head and looked at the swallow very seriously, even though he could not see anything on that faceless mask. "We can't run fast. Why don't you continue chasing?" The swallow's voice was shy and timid. "He looks so fierce. I'm afraid I can't beat him if I catch up." When Zheng Fei's face scrunched up, she suddenly roared. "Has your fat grown into your brain? Someone escaped. You don't have much time left. You still want to chase, play what chase? Play your mother. If you can't get the blood of balance, watch boss kill you with a sword." Zheng Fei was scolded to his face, but unexpectedly, He did not say anything. It was unknown whether it was because the swallow was really angry that made him retreat, or because of that threat about Boss that he decided to tolerate. In short, he immediately extinguished his anger, turned around, grabbed two extraordinary cultivators of the Feng and Qi lineages, and stuffed them directly into the large cauldron. Li Shou looked at Zheng Fei, then looked at the swallow, then looked at Zheng Fei, then looked at the swallow, and finally shook his head. It was unknown what he had comprehended, or maybe he just felt that shaking his head now made him seem more intelligent. And Fong Helling stood outside the open space, silently watching all of this, not saying a word. After killing an Azure Cloud Pavilion cultivator who had escaped, he had maintained this posture. Of course he recognized Jiang Wang. Even though they had only met face to face, even though he had only heard one sentence. How could he not recognize Jiang Wang? The first time he had officially started a battle with extraordinary power, he had faced Jiang Wang, and he had lost cleanly. At that time, that sword had slapped his face, making him feel even more humiliated, and he had broken down for a while. Later on, when he thought about it, he only felt that it was insignificant. Could that also be considered humiliation and also be considered pain? That was an outer sect expert of the Tao Academy together with his cousin, known as the Five Heroes of Maple Forest. He had known him for a long time, and they had been familiar with each other for a long time. Later on, he recalled the past many times, and vaguely remembered that a long time ago, his relationship with his cousin, Fong Pengju, was very good. He often ran behind his cousin, and followed his cousin to practice swordsmanship and martial arts. That was the person he admired, the goal he pursued. But why did he become cold later on? Was it when he first realized the importance of resources and discovered that the resources in the clan were controlled by his father? Was it when his cousin first lost his temper at him and scolded him for being a bastard like his father? Later on, he deliberately showed disdain towards Fong Pengju. Was it to defeat his initial admiration and tear apart the shadow over his head? He did not know the answer. But he still often thought about it. He thought about it many times, because the past, the old places, the old people could only be recalled. Chapter 781. Jiang Wang carried Feng Ming with one hand and left on the green cloud. As he rapidly advanced, he casually sent out erupting flame sparrows to create loud noises in the sky above Shun, in prefecture to attract the attention of the young experts. As for the cultivators still at the Azure Cloud Pavilion, this was the only thing he could do. Jiang Wang didn't have any feelings for them. Aside from his identity as Yu Songhai, there was nothing to do with them. There was no other reason for him to take the risk to save them. There was only one word. He couldn't bear to do it. Those demons besieged the Azure Cloud Pavilion because Marquis Weining Jiao Wu had gone to the front lines. But no matter what, they didn't dare to make a big fuss. That ghost fog formation was to hide their movements. Jiang Wang first broke the ghost fog formation to create an opportunity for the Azure Cloud Pavilion cultivators to escape. Then, he made a racket in the sky to attract the young experts to the Azure Cloud Pavilion. If those four demons didn't want to die in Yong, they would have to escape quickly. In theory, at least half of the Azure Cloud Pavilion cultivators could survive. And no matter what, he couldn't do it. After all, he wasn't a trustworthy person to the young experts. If he continued to be arrogant in the sky, he might be eliminated by someone. He didn't stop for a moment. After sending out a few erupting flame sparrows, he immediately turned west and flew in a low-key manner for a while before descending into the wilderness. He casually threw Feng Ming into the grass. He dispersed the celestial technique and felt the good fortune azure cloud floating under the cloud-top immortal palace. He could not help but think that the green cloud pavilion had been constantly gathering the good fortune green cloud. The cultivators of the cloud apex immortal palace in the late ancient times, who practiced the meteoric rise immortal technique, should have originated from this. In other words, the Azure Cloud Pavilion guaranteed the continuation of the meteoric rise immortal technique. If one day, all the clouds under the cloud-top immortal palace were replaced by the good fortune azure cloud, then could the good fortune azure cloud also support the cloud-top immortal palace? When the cloud-top immortal palace was at its peak, it was a colossus. Even if it could move, it would be difficult and slow. If it could rely on a huge amount of good fortune azure cloud, it could easily travel 1,000 miles and have a majestic momentum. That would truly be called suppressing the era. The meteoric rise was an immortal art that allowed Jiang Wang, an inner mansion cultivator, to escape from the encirclement of the 4 human demons. It was definitely the strongest escape technique he had mastered so far. Compared to the A-grade, low-grade Dao technique, Flame Meteor, it was much stronger. Of course, immortal techniques had their own system and could not be simply compared to Dao techniques. The 9 great immortal palaces had dominated the late antiquity era, but when it came to the modern era, only a few fragments of the immortal art system had been passed down. It was not until he found the lost building, the pavilion of green clouds, and mastered the meteoric rise that Jiang Wang was able to catch a glimpse of it. It was as if an invisible hand had erased everything about the immortal palace. Why were the 9 great immortal palaces destroyed? Who destroyed them? How did the immortal spell system disappear? The fog of history surged in time. Jiang Wang couldn't help but recall the 2 bloody words that had disappeared from the spirit fixation stele, Taoist thief. The Tao was a thief. What kind of thing could bear such a name? This made people fearful and uneasy. What Yiling Xiao said about fortune and misfortune might not be related to this. Putting aside his thoughts about the immortal palace for now, Jiang Wang lowered his head and glanced at Feng Ming. The shackles on his body had long been released, but he still did not move. His eyes were dull, and he did not speak. It was as if he had been scared silly. "If you're not dead, say something," Jiang Wang said, looking at him. Feng Ming's eyes were still dull for a while, before they finally regained some life, as if he had come back to life. "Is the pavilion of green clouds gone?" he asked. "You can understand it that way," Jiang Wang said. His voice was cold. It was not because he no longer needed to flatter Feng Ming as Yu Songhai. It was because the current Feng Ming did not have the right to live in a lie anymore. He had to face reality. Feng Ming moved his eyes with difficulty and looked at Jiang Wang. His eyes were hopeful. "My father escaped. When you didn't dare to look, his body was already cooked," Jiang Wang said. These words were so cold. They ignored his begging and rejected his fantasies. They pulled him from the difficult situation of comforting himself and looking for a life-saving straw into the bloody reality. Feng Ming opened his mouth forcefully. He probably wanted to cry, but he could not cry out loud. He wanted to cry, but strangely, there were no tears. At that time, he had been thrown into the open space and helplessly watched the fat, demonic man come and go. He knew that the demonic man was throwing the corpses into the cauldron one by one to cook. He stared at the night sky, not daring to look. His father's body had been cooked at that time. The moment the pavilion of green clouds was attacked, his father had judged that the situation was critical. He had given him the key to the secret storehouse and told him to hide while he went out to deal with the danger. When he was easily taken to the open space where the cultivators were gathered like livestock, he should have known that his father was gone, but he did not dare to face it. "I took the risk to save you, not to see you act sad," Jiang Wang said coldly. Feng Ming looked at Jiang Wang with some confusion. "Stand up," Jiang Wang shouted. Feng Ming subconsciously trembled. He supported himself with his hands on the ground and finally got up. He looked at Jiang Wang pitifully, like a weak little animal. The gloominess, arrogance, and joy of the past were all gone. Songhai, he called out tentatively. He was like a child who had no ability to protect himself and was testing the safety of touching him. Perhaps it was like Qi Lu said, without the protection of his father, Feng Yu, he was just a useless piece of trash. But he had clearly sensed Jiang Wang's goal, and guess what Jiang Wang was looking for? He was actually not stupid. Instead, he was very smart. He was just too weak. He had been protected too well and had experienced too little. When the wind blew, he stood strong and broke rotten wood. Jiang Wang ignored this cry and only said, "You begged me to save you, so I saved you. I hope you think about why you wanted to live." I. Feng Qi pursed his lips. Perhaps he couldn't find the answer. Finally, he said, "I'm very grateful to you. If you want to thank me, then quickly take out something of value. I will wait for you to thank me. If you want to take revenge, the people who destroyed the Azure Cloud Pavilion were the 9 great demons. They should also be aware of the possibility of revenge." Jiang Wang finished speaking calmly and turned around. He had already done everything he could to save Feng Ming. He wasn't Shi Lu and didn't have the hobby of taking in sons. "Songhai," Feng Ming called out. Where are you going? Where I should go? Can you take me with you?" Feng Ming said hesitantly, then hurriedly added, "I will be your follower. A good sect is gone just like that. A good country is gone just like that. This world is so cruel." Jiang Wang asked, "Are you willing to take a burden?" Feng Ming bit his lip and didn't say anything. "How old are you?" Jiang Wang asked again. This was almost a form of humiliation, but Feng Ming had no right to not answer. 21 years old, he said. "I remember your father saying that when he was 21, he had already opened up 3 trade routes for the Azure Cloud Pavilion. Think carefully about how you came to enjoy all this without doing anything. Where's the path you should take?" As Jiang Wang spoke, he suddenly thought of something and asked, "What day is it today?" Feng Ming didn't know why, but he still answered, "It seems to be the 28th of the first month." Jiang Wang nodded and strode off into the distance. "It's my birthday," he thought. Chapter 782. In a Nameless Wilderness. Asgard's seeking magic square, he Ling stood with his back against a thorny tree. He silently wiped his dagger, but he didn't care about the wounds on his body. Skinny Lee sat cross-legged in the grass, grimacing in pain as he bandaged the wounds on his other hand. Not far from him, Zhang Fei lay on the ground, his body a bloody mess as he huffed and puffed. After lying down for a while, he turned his head and saw Yin Zi and Liang Nine sitting hand in hand on a small hill. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva. Damn, bringing along a pretty boy at a time like this. Skinny Lee bared his teeth, sourly replying, "So what if you run fast?" "Huh." Yin Zi sneered. "You don't understand the fun of pretty boys." Compared to the others, she was completely unharmed. Liang Nine, whose fingers were interlocked with hers, was also completely refreshed. He had been chased by Yin Zi and escaped without so much as a scratch. He had taken advantage of his good fortune. Of course, if it weren't for Yin Zi, as a young citizen with a clean background, he wouldn't have needed to avoid being chased. At this moment, his expression was somewhat ugly, but he quickly forced himself to smile. Being ridiculed and looked down upon wasn't important. What was important was coaxing Yin Zi. Now that he said he had nothing to do with demonic humans, no one would believe him. He could foresee that for a long time to come, he would need to blend in with this group of demonic humans. Unable to harm Yin Zi with words, Zhang Fei angrily turned his head and cursed at the sky. "Bastard Yao Qi, I'll chop him into pieces sooner or later. Chop off his flesh." Skinny Lee agreed. "Don't you think he needs to be taught a lesson?" Zhang Fei cursed, "Bastard." Now he's focused on showing off, running faster than a dog. Xue Mingyi is in Nanxiang, next to Shun, but he's already here in Hechang. He needs to be taught a lesson. Skinny Lee agreed without hesitation. Not only did he agree, but he also called on the others to agree. He glared at Liang Nine. "Isn't my third brother right?" "Ah, yes, Liang Nine quickly said. Yin Zi squeezed his hand, telling him not to be afraid. "That trash. Why aren't you saying anything?" Skinny Lee glared at Fong Helling in front of the thorny tree. Fong Helling raised his head, his blood-red eyes looking over. "Yes," he said. "Li Laosi," Swallow shouted. "Sigh, boring." Skinny Lee shook his head. "It's as if I'm bullying you. When Yao Qi was biting me, I even saved his life." "Impudent," Zhang Fei suddenly said. "What fourth brother? That's your fourth brother, you know." "Oh, that's right." Skinny Lee also reacted and glared at Yin Zi unhappily. "Why don't you respect me? You're not allowed to call Little Crane that in the future." Swallow said. "Why should I?" Zhang Fei glared at him. "That's right." Skinny Lee followed. Yin, Z said angrily. Little Crane and I are purely helping the two of you this time. The two of us don't get any benefits at all. Why don't you know what's good for you? What does this have to do with whether he's trash or not? Zhang Fei was puzzled. That's right. What does it matter? Skinny Lee asked. Yinzi was so angry that she stomped her feet. What a bunch of bastards. Fong Helling, who was being criticized, did not show any attitude from start to finish. He lowered his head and wiped his dagger. Liang Nine did not say anything. He knew that he did not have the right to interrupt. Yinzi said that she liked him, but Zhang Fei called him a pretty boy. Yinzi agreed with him, and when Skinny Lee called the blood-eyed man trash, Yinzi immediately stopped him. Among the 4 demonic humans, the blood-eyed one had the lowest status. But even so, in Yinzi's heart, he was much more important than Liang Nine. Love or dislike, Yinzi could say whatever she wanted, but he needed to know that he was not that favored. He only quietly listened to the quarrel between the demonic humans, trying to understand their personalities and find a way to get along with them. That way, he might be able to live a little longer. Less talk, more action, more effort. But in the next moment, the demonic humans who were quarreling suddenly stopped talking. Liang Nine felt Yinzi let go of his hand. He also saw Zhang Fei, who was paralyzed on the ground, stand up. Skinny Lee, who had wrapped his left hand like a dumpling, also jumped up, ready for battle. Fong Helling stood up and stopped wiping his dagger. He did not know what was going on, but he instinctively looked to the west. He did not know what was in the west, but there seemed to be a voice telling him to look over here. And so he looked over. In his field of vision, a middle-aged man wearing scholar's clothes slowly walked over. His movements were slow, but strangely fast. The grass parted like flowing water, not bothering to interfere with his progress. He had a long beard and a thin face. His eyes were especially bright, as if they could see through people's hearts. When this person looked over, Liang Nine hurriedly lowered his head. Someone who could make Zhang Fei, Skinny Lee, and Yinzi stand up to greet was either the first or second demonic human. Zhang Fei and the others were already so powerful and terrifying. How terrifying was this person who had just arrived? But he looked very normal. Liang Nine thought inexplicably. Fortune teller, Zhang Fei yelled. Quick, tell me where my toy went. Don't be impatient. Don't be impatient. The man called fortune teller seemed to have a good temper. His voice was also very calm. He asked as he walked, How was the blood of balance? I got it. Zhang Fei grinned. 2. Skinny Lee also smiled. The long-bearded man also smiled. Did you eat it? I ate it, Zhang Fei said. It didn't taste good, Skinny Lee said. How do you feel? The long-bearded man stopped and looked at Zhang Fei. Is your evil retribution still working? Liang Nine noticed that when this man only asked Zhang Fei, Skinny Lee maintained a rare silence. Zhang Fei giggled. Even the one surnamed Yao suffered. What about your Tongwei? The long-bearded man asked Skinny Lee. Skinny Lee replied, It seems to have changed, but I can't describe it in detail. I'm also confused. It's fine. The long-bearded man laughed when he heard this. His voice carried encouragement. It's a good thing left behind from the ancient era. It needs time to adjust. When the blood of balance truly balances the two of you, you'll be strong. Can I be as strong as the old man? Zhang Fei asked excitedly. How much are you lacking? Skinny Lee asked. The long-bearded man couldn't laugh anymore. He sighed helplessly. I have to know how the old man is now. Calculate him, Zhang Fei said. Calculate his fortune, Skinny Lee urged. The long-bearded man pinched his long beard. He had a gentle smile on his face as he looked at Zhang Fei. Are you the one who asked me to calculate? Old 4. Zhang Fei turned to look at Skinny Lee. I've lost a lot of blood. I'm a bit dizzy right now. Then third brother, you should rest first. Your body is important, Skinny Lee said with concern. Zhang Fei said seriously to him. Don't forget to remind the fortune teller to calculate where our toys went. It was as if he couldn't see the long-bearded man anymore. Okay, I won't forget. Skinny Lee cooperated. Zhang Feiyu really laid down, closed his eyes, and fell into a deep sleep. The long-bearded man didn't care. He only looked at Fong Helling. Can her body take it? I can, Fong Helling said briefly. The long-bearded man looked back at Skinny Lee. You said, what toys? A young man so tall, so wide. Li Laosi gestured a few movements. His bandaged hand wasn't very convenient, so he spoke vaguely, but he took pleasure in it. In our hands, he snatched away a disciple from both the Fong and Qi branches. We couldn't catch up. The long-bearded man casually listened for a while. When he heard the last part, he stroked his long beard. He was interested. He turned to look at Yanzi. You couldn't catch up even if you took off your mask? I don't know, Yanzi said. I didn't chase. The long-bearded man nodded. He didn't ask for the reason. Okay. He gently rolled up his sleeves. I'll do a divination. Don't. Yanzi stopped him. Not here. What? Skinny Lee asked. Yanzi glared at him. Without a blood sacrifice, how do you want the fortune teller to calculate? Was his name the fortune teller? Or was his identity? But what was a blood sacrifice? Liang Nine was thinking when he suddenly met the long-bearded man's gaze. The long-bearded man, called the fortune teller, looked at Liang Nine very casually. It was as if he was looking at a passerby passing by. It was casual and normal. Isn't this one? He said. Liang Nine felt his hands and feet go cold. Chapter 783. The Searchar human demon was still wiping his dagger. The 10,000 fiend human demon was still sleeping, and the flesh-slicing human demon's expression was normal. No one had any objections to the fortune teller's idea, and no one would object to the fortune teller's idea. Liang Nine stood in the cold, unable to resist or escape as he welcomed his doom. No, no, he heard a voice say. He's very obedient, so keep him. This voice was like the sound of nature. I'll go catch another one for you, the swallow hurriedly said before her figure flashed, disappearing into the distance. It was clear that although she dared to object, she did not have the qualifications to stop the fortune teller. She could only suggest a backup for the fortune teller to choose. As for the fortune teller, would he give her face? Liang Nine felt his breathing stop. It did not feel good to have his fate in someone else's hands, but he did not have the ability to control it. He could only think that in this situation, he could not lose the love that the swallow had for him. He definitely could not. He felt the fortune teller's calm gaze lightly fall on him. That gaze seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Fortunately, it was finally moved away. The fortune teller sighed. Women are very troublesome. Too troublesome. Li Shou agreed. No, not troublesome at all, Liang Nine said in his heart. He almost cried out loud. At this moment, he felt a great sense of gratitude towards the swallow. Even if it were not for these human demons, he would not have suffered such a calamity. He was truly moved to tears. He no longer felt that the faceless mask was terrifying, but instead felt a unique sense of beauty. He was also grateful to his parents for giving him this somewhat handsome face. He breathed deeply, feeling the existence of life. At the same time, he did not dare to attract the attention of any human demons. Only now did he realize that cold sweat had once again soaked his clothes. Too terrifying. The swallow returned quickly, perhaps because she was worried that the fortune teller would not be able to wait. In any case, when she returned with a medium-built man, the fortune teller and Li Shou did not chat for long. The content of the two human demons' conversation was very strange. It was all about how much silver was there, how much jewelry was there, and so on. It did not seem like two notorious human demons at all. The difference was that the fortune teller's expression was very casual. Obviously, he was just chatting casually. Skinny Lee, on the other hand, was chatting until his face was flushed red. He seemed to be enjoying himself. Yanzi threw the helpless man in front of the fortune teller. See, I'm just in time, right? The fortune teller declined to comment and only said to Skinny Lee, deal with it. Thus, Skinny Lee began to strip off the man's clothes in an agile manner. The swallow had already returned to Liang Nine's side. I'm back, she said. At this moment, Liang Nine actually felt a bit of gentleness. Thank you. His voice was a little choked. Idiot. Yanzi extended her slender finger and wiped the corner of his eyes. A man must be strong. Liang Nine bit his lips and nodded. On the other side, the divination master squatted down and casually brushed his hand across the ground. The grass and trees receded and the color of stone condensed. A flat circular stone platform appeared in front of him. It was definitely not out of place, as if it had existed here for a very long time. There were complicated carvings on the stone platform that were twisted together in a very strange pattern. Liang Nine only glanced at it and felt dizzy. Yanzi covered his eyes and said gently, "Don't look at it blindly. It's not good for you." Liang Nine calmed down for a while, and the feeling of disgust passed. He replied with some lingering fear, "I know. He's called the Divination Master and is ranked second among the 9 great demons. He's called the fortune-telling human demon." Yanzi whispered in his ear as if she was introducing him. Fortune-telling? Liang Nine was a little confused. Compared to the 10,000 evil and the flesh-cutting demon, the second great demon didn't seem fierce at all. "Ah, fortune-telling," Yanzi said faintly. "Every time I tell, I want a life." Liang Nine could clearly hear the sound of saliva rolling down his throat. Is that so?" The divination master didn't seem to care what they were saying or how they were talking about him. He also didn't have any objections to Yin Zi casually catching a pretty boy from the Azure Cloud Pavilion. The man who had been stripped naked was placed on the stone platform in the shape of the Chinese character Tai. He was a very ordinary person, probably someone that Yin Zi had casually caught from a street. He wasn't a transcendent, nor did he have any signs of practicing mortal martial arts. The excess fat on his body was very obvious, and he smelled like he didn't bathe very often. His round eyes were filled with fear, but he couldn't even move his eyelids. The divination master reached out and gently caressed his eyes, closing them for him. A shining steel knife was handed over from the side. Zhang Fei had crawled up at some point and moved to the side to watch. "Here, I'll lend you the knife so you don't dirty your hands. Since he's become a sacrifice, he's not dirty." The divination master didn't take the knife. He only used his index finger to make 5 cuts on the naked man's neck, wrist, and foot. He silently watched the blood flow. "You came so early. Why didn't you kill Yao Qi?" Zhang Fei watched for a while, then suddenly asked an unrelated question. The divination master didn't raise his head, only watching the blood flow. He said, "If I kill Yao Qi, you won't be able to live. Han Su has something very important to do right now, which is why the Azure Cloud Pavilion trip was successful. We can't be more important than that." The naked man's blood flowed along the lines of the stone platform, gathering into a shallow indentation. The indentation was like an inkstone, and the blood was the ink. He put his index finger into the blood inkstone, allowing the blood to wrap around his finger. He sighed. "This is where the scale lies." Zhang Fei didn't say anything else. He was a bit dissatisfied with being chased by Yao Qi, but the divination master had already given him an explanation. The explanation was very reasonable, and he was a reasonable person. "That's right." The divination master gently moved his finger. "As for that person, the person who wanted me to calculate. Do you have any more detailed information?" "Generous." Zhang Fei smiled inexplicably. "He's a very reasonable person." Li Shou emphasized again. When the divination master asked for information, everyone had to answer as much as possible. Even Swallow, who was flirting with Liang Nine, found some time to reply. His escape technique is very advanced. Every step he takes leaves behind a green cloud mark. She even secretly pinched Liang Nine. Liang Nine hurriedly said, He's called Yu Song Hai. He was recommended into the sect by Feng Ming." Thinking about it, he added, "Feng Yue Zong Shou has high hopes for him. Chilu Zong Shou also likes him." "That's right. His sword technique is very good." He poured out all the information he knew like beans from a bamboo tube. Yu Song Hai casually stepped out from the darkness. The scene of him saving someone from the hands of the 4 demons was something that he would never forget. But Yu Song Hai didn't save him. The divination master's gaze moved and landed on Fong Helling. Fong Helling was still calmly wiping his dagger. He said, "It seems like he's very confident." He only said this sentence. The divination master retracted his gaze. Chapter 784. The dagger had been polished until it was shiny, the cold light, even dazzling. But he was still wiping it. He always wanted to wipe something away, but he knew better than anyone that some things couldn't be wiped away. But he had to do something, right? Otherwise, what would he rely on to survive? He knew the guy with the alias Yu Songhai better than anyone else present. That person's name, that person's background, and even that person's living habits, he didn't have a good impression of that guy. Not in the past, not now, and probably not in the future. In the past, he hated that guy for always holding his head high, not showing any humility in front of the three great families of Maplewood City. He remembered that when his cousin talked about that guy, there was always a bit of jealousy in his praise. In the past, he didn't know what that guy had to be jealous of. This time, it was just a quick glance. But that fleeting glance allowed him to see that that guy was still the same as before. Nothing had changed. He was still proud, still determined, still brave, still the same, always fighting for justice. Not being changed, this was something that really made people jealous. Why couldn't he be changed? Clearly, everything had changed. After so many years, he thought he finally understood what his cousin was jealous of. But it had been many years. He knew that guy had too much information. If he gave that information to the diviner, he could definitely turn that guy upside down. But why didn't he say anything in the end? Why? Fong Helling kept his head down, wiping the dagger. That dagger seemed like it would never be clean. He didn't have an answer. He probably just didn't want to say it. After everyone had said it, the diviner thought for a moment, then raised his finger that was soaked in blood. Next to the small dent on the stone platform, there was a flat, empty space without any lines. It was like a blank sheet of paper. The diviner dipped his finger in the blood and wrote the character Yun in a flamboyant style. The character was ethereal. The blood was sinister and strange. After this character was written, the 5 wounds on the naked man's body immediately stopped bleeding, and he stopped breathing, completely dead. The diviner stared at this character for a while, then suddenly closed his eyes. 2 streaks of blood snaked down from the corners of his eyes. It looked extremely terrifying. "What is it?" Zhang Fei asked. The divination master closed his eyes and didn't speak. After a long time, he opened his mouth and said, "The karma is too deep and heavy. Even I can't see it clearly for the time being." The bloody words disappeared at this moment. The stone platform collapsed, turning into the earth. Zhang Fei grinned again. "Interesting." Skinny Lee was very surprised. "Our toys are that powerful." The blood at the corner of his eyes had already stopped flowing, but the fortune teller still had his eyes closed, as if he was restraining himself from looking at anything. "But not being able to calculate is itself an answer," he said softly. Then he began to laugh. He, under the astonished gazes of the other demons. He laughed maniacally. "It's the immortal master," he said heavily. After leaving Shannon Prefecture, Jiang Wang did not stop. He disguised himself and left the Yong border after passing through Yonghuai and Fuchin. After saving Feng Ming, the rest was his own life. How he chose and how he moved forward was his own business. Jiang Wang also had his own life to live. He had no obligation to be responsible for everyone. After the 9 great demons caused such a ruckus in Shun and Prefecture, people like him who entered the Yong border with ulterior motives would not have much peace in the future. In particular, he did not know where he came from. Therefore, leaving the Yong border as soon as possible was a wise choice. As for what would happen to Feng Ming in the future, as for the lifeless disciples that the mysterious person said had been active in the Yong border recently, and as for how Fong Helling became one of the 9 great demons compared to his own safety, these were not important. Among these, what he cared about the most was the clues about Zhang Linchuan. But someone who could fight and win against the god of the netherworld was obviously not someone he could deal with now. He had already decided not to have any ideas about Zhang Linchuan in the short term. The enemy was strong, and he was weak. He would stay away. The next time he came to the western region, he would not be the same person. Perhaps the current problem would not be a problem. There is a small country to the east of the Yone border called He. Further east of He was Pegasus Plateau. At the same time, Pegasus Plateau was north of the Yun Kingdom. Further north of Pegasus Plateau was a powerful sect called Benevolent School. It was a medical sect that was as famous as the East King Valley. Generally, no one would provoke such a sect. Further north of the Jing Kingdom was the Jing Kingdom. The vast Jing Kingdom and the once glorious Yong Kingdom were like two giants, one big and one small, half surrounding the area around Pegasus Plateau. The fertile Pegasus Plateau was also a land without a master. Jiang Wang always had an inexplicable feeling that the existence of the Jing Kingdom was to prevent the Yong Kingdom from encroaching on Pegasus Plateau. When leaving the Yong border and entering the Jing Kingdom, Jiang Wang suddenly thought of a problem. He already knew that it was the cloud-top immortal palace that left the blood of balance in the Feng and Qi meridians. This allowed the Feng and Qi meridians of the Qingyun Pavilion to maintain the balance for a long time. But why did the cloud-top immortal palace do this? What was the point of maintaining the balance of the Feng and Qi meridians? If it was only for the continuation of the Qingyun Pavilion's legacy, it did not seem necessary. The Lingxiao Pavilion and the Ethereal Palace did not have such a situation. He thought of an extremely gloomy possibility. Could it be for the sake of the blood of balance? The refinement of the blood of balance could not be achieved simply by boiling the cultivators of the Feng and Qi meridians together. It must have its own unique refinement method and requirements. Then, where did the all-evil devil man and the flesh-cutting devil man obtain the method to refine the blood of balance? Could it be also passed down from the cloud-top immortal palace? Or even if that method was lost, as long as they knew that the cultivators of the Feng and Qi meridians could refine the blood of balance, it would only be a matter of time before they researched the corresponding method. The instant clear skies immortal technique he obtained allowed him to walk on the virtuous green clouds. It changed directions as if he was walking on flat ground. The virtuous green clouds looked very decent and kind. But don't forget that the Qingyun Pavilion that inherited some of the cloud-top immortal palace's legacies had a secret technique called Calamity Dark Clouds. It was sent by the Qingyun Pavilion's sect master, Qi Dingfang, and was very dangerous. The immortal technique Instant Clear Skies used the virtuous green clouds as the technique interface. Was the blood of balance also the technique interface of some immortal technique? Moreover, corresponding to Instant Clear Skies, should there also be an immortal technique that used the Calamity Dark Clouds as the technique interface? There was too much history hidden in the near ancient era. It was a huge blank that the later generations could not touch and could only speculate in the long years. Immersed in thinking about the dusty history of the near ancient era, Jiang Wang suddenly felt a huge palpitation in his heart. It was as if he was being stared at by some terrifying, ferocious beast, but he did not know where that gaze came from. Since he did not know where this feeling came from, he did not know how to deal with it. He could only hold his long sword tightly and look around vigilantly. At this moment, the ruins of the cloud-top immortal palace suddenly trembled. The Cloud Pavilion, the Ethereal Palace, and the Qingyun Pavilion, the three intact buildings simultaneously circulated with clear light. A wisp of ancient and magnificent aura appeared in the five resident seas for a short time. That palpitation feeling, it instantly disappeared. Chapter 785. Jiang Wang was not completely sure what had happened just now. He had not taken the initiative during the entire process and could only feel it passively. However, from the sudden change in the cloud-top immortal palace and the disappearance of the palpitations, the cloud-top immortal palace had probably resisted some kind of attack. That unknown danger might be an enemy from the cloud-top immortal palace, the culprit who had destroyed the cloud-top immortal palace, or some other enemy, such as what Zhuang Gaoxian and Du Ruhui had done to investigate Dong A's death. There were many possibilities, and they were basically people he could not deal with. There was no point in guessing. Since the cloud-top immortal palace could withstand it, he could put it aside for now. If he was not strong enough, there was no point in thinking too much. He gathered his thoughts and hurried on. This trip back to the Chi division could be used to train. He could hone his new mystical abilities, open up his second inner residence, and explore new treasures. At the same time, he had to find a Tao technique that was qualified to be engraved in the second inner residence. His biggest goal in returning to Linzi this time was to help Chung Gung Sheng resist Yung Gunzuin's counterattack. At the beginning of August last year, Chung Gung Sheng had sent Yung Gunzuin to Jixia Academy to study for a year, saying that he would help him achieve the Outer Tower. This meant that at least before August this year, Chung Gung Sheng had to be fully prepared. Yung Gunzuin's private business was almost dismembered. Wang Yiwu was grounded in the military's death row prison and could not return to Linzi for 3 years. With all these factors, when Yung Gunzuin left Jixia Academy, there was bound to be an unavoidable confrontation. That was Yung Gunzuin, who was known to steal the limelight of his peers. The pressure Chung Gung Sheng was under was not obvious. However, one could tell from his crazy seclusion. In terms of wisdom, Jiang Wang believed that he couldn't help much. All he could do was spend more time and effort on cultivation. Therefore, he challenged Chung Gung Sheng to a duel in the grand illusionary land many times. He didn't really care about achievements. He just wanted to help his friend. Unfortunately, he was rejected every time. This fatty doesn't know what's good for him. Jiang Wang stayed in the state of Japan for a few days. First, he wanted to experience the world. Second, he was curious about the treasured land of Pegasus Plain. He wanted to see if there were any legends or old stories in the neighboring state of Japan to enrich his vision and experience. However, after staying for a few days, new doubts arose. This small country was different from other countries. Its overall temperament was gentle, and it did not have the cautiousness or sense of urgency that other small countries had. The pedestrians on the street were all walking slowly. It was obvious that they didn't have much pressure in life. The buildings here were generally short and wide. Other than the temple, there were few tall buildings. It was rare to see people quarreling on the streets with red faces. Whenever there was a conflict, the bystanders would enthusiastically mediate a few words, and the quarrel would quickly disperse. How could such a small country be able to remain calm beside the bed of the Yong kingdom? How many years had it not provoked the armed forces? How could the common people live such peaceful and prosperous lives? At first, Jiang Wang thought that it was because of some kind of secret hidden in Pegasus Plain. Powerful countries like Jing and Jing had specially supported the state of Japan and used it as a nail to nail it here and prevent the Yong kingdom from advancing east. This was the association that Xingyue Plain brought to him. Wasn't it because Xingyue Plain couldn't compete with the Qi and Jing and could only be shelved? However, he quickly discovered that this conjecture wasn't necessarily correct. First, it was because of the geographical relationship. Far away in the central region, the Jing kingdom couldn't provide much support even if it supported the state of Japan. Just like the Zhuang kingdom, it didn't receive much substantial support from the Jing kingdom. The Zhuang kingdom was able to stand firm in the western region by relying on 3 generations of management. The Jing kingdom had a vast territory. At the same time, it was bordered by a large regional country like Yong and a holy land of medicine like Renxingguan. It could provide more support to the state of Japan. However, it was obvious that the people of the state of Japan didn't have a particularly favorable impression of the Jing kingdom. Jiang Wang occasionally heard the people of the state of Japan mention the people of the state of Japan. They disdained them as barbarians. If the state of Japan was behind the state of Japan, then it shouldn't be like this. Thus, he turned his gaze to the temples. The state of Japan's faith was different from that of other places. There wasn't a single Taoist temple or Buddhist temple within its borders. There were only temples unique to the state of Japan. The people of this country generally believed in the original God. According to legend, the original God was the son of the clear sky. The original God meant the original God. In times of chaos, the people felt the hardships of the world and had no way to make a living. The son of the clear sky accepted the order and descended to deliver all living beings. Thus, the world's first God was born. It was the original god. Of course, this was a legend only circulated in the state of Japan. In any other country, Jiang Wang had never heard of such a thing. The so-called primordial heavenly god was also completely unknown. His reputation didn't leave the state of Japan. If one were to look at the world, at least the people of Mu wouldn't agree to the original god being the world's first god. But the reason why the state of Japan was so peaceful was probably inseparable from the original god's temples all over the state of Japan. After coming into contact with the white-bone evil god, Jiang Wang naturally didn't have a very good impression of this so-called god. Even the name original god made him feel like the name of the heavenly horse plains was just a perfunctory word. The era of the great prosperity of Shinto had long since passed. Even the state of Mu, which was one of the strongest countries in the world, couldn't spread the faith of their god song too beyond its borders. It was reasonable for the tiny state of Japan to be stagnant in its own land. And with the great power displayed by the white-bone evil god as a comparison, it wasn't hard to understand that a real god could protect the state of Japan. In fact, after realizing that the state of Japan might have a real god, Jiang Wang had already prepared to leave. His cultivation didn't involve himself in the Shinto path, and he had no interest in gods. In a short but spacious wine house, he drank a pot of local Qinghe wine. Just as he was about to leave, after finishing the wine, a conversation caught his attention. The ones who spoke were two patrons of the tavern. They were both in their 20s and looked relatively young. Have you been paying attention to what's happening in the West? The state of Yong dispatched troops to cut off the reefs and defeated the border troops of the state of Reef. They might have even reached the reefs by now, said one of the men dressed in martial attire. He thought for a moment, then added, the one leading the troops seems to be Jiao Wu. Ahaha. The other man seemed to be a priest of the original god temple. He was dressed in casual clothes, but there was a piece of jade on his waist that represented the temple. Hearing this, he laughed. Is it that Jiao Wu I know? The man in martial attire also laughed. Who else can command an army in the state of Yong? The man who seemed to be a priest shook his head and sighed ruefully. When the state of Reef was founded, they said something like, Rock and Jiao share the world. Our temple has records of that. If Jiao Wu were to destroy the reefs, it would be interesting. These two men had extraordinary statuses, but they didn't seem to think that what they were talking about was anything important and didn't worry about being overheard. In fact, from Jiang Wang's observation, there weren't many people in the wine house who were interested in what they were talking about. What great war! What great army! Those were all too far away from the state of Japan. Previously, when Zhuang Yong fought the state of Japan so fiercely, the state of Japan remained unmoved, neither nervous nor agitated. Reality also proved that no one, be it Zhuang Yong, had any thoughts about the state of Japan. I wonder if the state of Chun will react? Asked the man in martial attire casually. He didn't seem to care. Who knows? The man who seemed to be a priest of the original god temple waved his hand. Who cares what they do? Isn't everyone here already? Let's go to the fragrance of 3 portions. Let's continue drinking. The two men laughed and joked as they walked out of the wine house. Inside the wine house, Jiang Wang slowly put down his wine cup. The Qinghe wine rolled down his throat. There was a vigorous growth mixed with the bitterness of saplings breaking through the soil. Chapter 786. If Jiang Wang knew that the leader of the 9 human demons was currently living in seclusion in the valley of no return of the Qin state, perhaps he would think more about the human demons attacking the Azure Cloud Pavilion and causing havoc in Shun and Prefecture, but he didn't know. Therefore, he didn't think that there would be any changes in Yang's expedition. In his view, the destruction of the Reef State was a foregone conclusion. Jiang Wang wasn't the only one who didn't know that the number 1 human demon was in the Valley of No Return. The entire Yong state knew nothing about this. Yao Qi, the Shengshan Count in charge of handling the matter of the Azure Cloud Pavilion's destruction, had only temporarily concluded that the 9 human demons had taken a fancy to some ancient inheritance of the Azure Cloud Pavilion and had launched a surprise attack, while Marquis Waning was away from Shun and Prefecture. After finding Feng Ming and learning about the blood balance, Yao Qi was even more certain of this conjecture. However, if the 9 human demons had some sort of tacit understanding with the Chun state, then the Chun state's power shouldn't have been ignored. Of course, these matters had nothing to do with Jiang Wang. At this moment, he was sitting in a high-end wine house in the Kingdom of Japan. He only had some inexplicable thoughts. For example, the Temple of Heaven seemed to have very relaxed rules. The priests could actually drink alcohol and visit brothels. In comparison, being a monk was too difficult, and the name Sanfen Fragrance House made him momentarily absent-minded. He thought of the days when he drank and chatted merrily with Zhao Ruqing, Du Yehu, and the others. He thought of that red shadow. He could have easily gotten rid of these miscellaneous thoughts, but before he went on another long journey, he temporarily let himself go. The terrifying pressure he had been enduring all this time was unimaginable to ordinary people. He had almost never given himself time to relax. Perhaps the peaceful atmosphere of the Kingdom of Japan had silently infected him. For some reason, he suddenly wanted to go take a look at Sanfen Fragrance House. Thus, he got up and went to take a look at Sanfen Fragrance House. Lifting the thick curtains of the wine house, he was greeted by a gust of cold wind. He closed his eyes and felt it for a moment before continuing to walk out. Head held high, spine straight, sword in hand, footsteps firm. The February spring breeze was still cold, like frost. Sanfen Fragrance House was spread all over the world. It wasn't a lie. In Maplewood City, where the Zhuang state had already been destroyed, Sanfen Fragrance House was the #1 wind and moon pavilion. Linzi City also had a fragrance house, second only to the 4 famous brothels. From the west to the east for tens of thousands of li, the 3 fragrances seemed to be everywhere. This kind of coverage was astonishing. It was already a huge force on its own. If it was unified, it would be comparable to any sect in the world. However, Jiang Wang knew that all the 3 fragrant brothels in the world had a basic principle. They did not involve themselves with transcendence. Sanfen Chi's brothels, the 4 brothels, Chi, Sanfen brothels. 3 fragrances and had never had a transcendent cultivator stand in front of the stage. They would never participate in the local political disputes of the branch and would only do the pure brothel business. This was the foundation for the rapid expansion of 3 fragrances in and its branches all over the world. TSS and, of course, Sanfen Fragrance House, which was spread all over the world, was not unobstructed. At least in the northern region, Sanfen Fragrance House did not have a single branch. It was said that the owner of Sanfen Fragrance House had offended an important figure in Mu State, so the branch was banned from entering the northern region. No one knew if the rumors were true or false, but it was true that Sanfen Fragrance House stopped outside the northern region. Sanfen Fragrance House in Japan was only 3 stories tall, probably to cater to the architectural style here. The buildings were connected and occupied a large area. The floor was very warm, and the air was filled with the fragrance of cosmetics. The inner room was more like spring than the outer room. Jiang Wang's tone was casual as the procuress politely greeted him. "I want a seat with fewer people. Bring me good wine and a good voice." The brothel keeper smiled brightly. Of course, it was not because Jiang Wang was handsome or rich. No matter who it was, she could still smile brightly. "Lang Jun, this way, please." No matter how old she was, she could still call him Lang Jun. Her arms were pillowed on by thousands, and her lips were tasted by tens of thousands. Jiang Wang naturally did not care about the enthusiasm in the brothel. He was not here for physical matters, so he did not need to go to the room. He sat down in a private room, separated by a plum screen, and listened to the clear and mellow singing not far away. He let the memories come back bit by bit. Ruqing was the one who came to these places the most often. But Jiang Wang knew that Zhao Ruqing did not like it. What warm and fragrant jade! What beautiful women like flowers! Zhao Ruqing had seen too many and was tired of seeing them. As long as he showed his face, many young ladies and young wives would fight to stick to him. How could he be intoxicated by the land of warmth and tenderness? He just wanted to numb himself and seek absent-minded satisfaction in the numbness of day after day. Good wine was served, and the person serving it was a gentle girl. Jiang Wang waved his hand and took the wine pot. He turned the wine cups over and filled 2 cups. He used his index finger to push a cup in front of the girl. "Please drink," he said. "Let's drink and enjoy ourselves." The girl was not surprised. In a place like a brothel, there were all kinds of people. There were those who came to seek pleasure, those who looked repulsive, and those who had many eccentricities. It was hard to count. "Then, young master, please tell me what you need." After all, the one who spent money was the master. The guest could do whatever he wanted. She took a small sip and sat quietly to the side, listening to the music. Jiang Wang did not pay attention to her. He first filled a cup for himself and poured it again. The cup of wine was only half filled when suddenly a person with a strong smell of alcohol squeezed over. Bang! He put his hands on the table and looked down at Jiang Wang. "Hey, guess you." The girl serving the wine got up to stop him, but she was blocked by the person who came. The girl serving the wine looked at the jade on his waist and sat down without saying a word. Jiang Wang continued to pour wine. When the cup was full, he slightly raised his eyes. He recognized the person who came. It was the young man who he suspected to be the priest of the Tianxin temple that he saw in the wine house. At this time, the man in martial attire who came with him was not by his side. "A friend from afar. Don't you want to pour me a cup?" He looked at Jiang Wang and said. Jiang Wang filled his own cup and then gently put down the wine pot. The silver wine pot was still on the table. It was a silent answer. The person who came leaned forward a bit, showing a strong sense of oppression. "Are you following me?" he asked. "Don't misunderstand. I'm just a passerby," Jiang Wang said. "I happen to hear you talk about the 3 Fragrant Brothel, so I wanted to come and see. We talk so much, but you only heard about the 3 Fragrant Brothel. Only the 3 Fragrant Brothel is more interesting," Jiang Wang said. "Ha ha ha ha." The person who came laughed. The atmosphere of the whole room seemed to relax. The benevolent see benevolence. The wise see wisdom. If you can see the 3 Fragrant Brothel, it seems that you may be an interesting person. "Perhaps," Jiang Wang said. "I've already explained what should be explained. It's very impolite of you to be like this. Is there anything else? You don't know who I am?" The person who came frowned. He had a condescending pressure. "You should know that my temper is not very good." Jiang Wang looked at this noble of Japan, who obviously had a very high status. His expression did not change. He only said, "I'm not in a very good mood." Chapter 787. The waitress held her breath. She sympathized with this customer who was easy to serve, but the person who was confronting him at this time was a big shot that she absolutely could not afford to offend. She didn't even have the thought of informing the procuress, because no matter how powerful the 3 Fragrances restaurant was outside, in the state of Japan, they had to obey this person's orders. In the small private room, one was sitting and one was standing. Both of them were young and proud people. Their eyes met, and they did not see any signs of retreat in each other's eyes. "Now I believe that you're really just passing by." The person who came finally stood up straight. His hand also left the wine table, and he changed his extremely oppressive posture. "Because no one who knows me dares to talk to me like that," he said. In a long-term peaceful environment and a strong and relatively gentle religious atmosphere, the people of the state of Japan had generally developed a gentle and quiet personality, but this person was extremely confident and arrogant. It was unknown whether he was powerful himself, or his background was powerful, or both. During the whole process of this person holding the table and leaving the table, this ordinary wooden table was stable. Even if the cup was full, not a drop of wine spilled out, because Jiang Wang had a finger gently placed on the wine table. The waitress was sitting to the side, but she was completely unaware of the confrontation of Tao energy that had just overflowed on the wine table. The extremely delicate and subtle probing and collision, from the beginning to the end, did not cause any ripples. "I've disappointed you," Jiang Wang said softly as he retracted his finger. The confrontation with the two immortals one after another allowed Jiang Wang to make great progress in the fine control of Tao energy. Of course, he would never tell others where he had fought with the two immortals. On the contrary, I like surprises, the person said. It makes me feel that life is not so boring. The exchange just now was enough to show that Jiang Wang had extraordinary strength. It was just a probe, so it was good to limit it to this extent. If he wanted to take another step forward, he would have to fight for real and engage in a bloody battle. There was no need for this. Therefore, he was ready to leave. Enjoy the wine and the beauty. I believe you'll like the state of Japan. Jiang Wang raised his cup as a farewell. For the people, this is indeed a good country. The man smiled. Before he left, he suddenly said to the serving girl, "Perhaps he wants to know who I am. There's no need to hide it from him." Then, he swung his long sword out. At this moment, the waitress realized that this guest was not an ordinary person. She looked at Jiang Wang with some reverence in her eyes. She was ready to tell her story. He wanted Chun Xing to tell Jiang Wang how extraordinary that person was and how powerful his background was. He was thinking about how to remind Jiang Wang to be careful. But Jiang Wang just said, "Please drink," as if he had just sat down. It was the same words and the same attitude. The young man who came abruptly and left in a hurry might have wanted to probe Jiang Wang's background. Perhaps he was just being arrogant. Perhaps he thought that Jiang Wang would definitely go to him and apologize after knowing his identity. But none of that mattered. Jiang Wang was not interested. To him, the state of Japan was a passerby. To him, the state of Japan was a passerby. This trip to the fragrance of 3 fragrances was just a momentary indulgence of his emotions. It was a nostalgia for the time in Maplewood City. But now he was not in the mood. The wine was still on the table, but he did not want to drink anymore. He came on a whim and left when the fun was over. A distinguished scholar should be like this. All of a sudden, all the distracting thoughts dissipated. He cut himself off. Jiang Wang smiled freely. He left an ingot of gold and got up to leave. He was neither hasty nor hesitant. He had made up his mind and had gone through 1,000 sales. No one knew that he had performed a sword move here. That sword move was a distinguished scholar's downfall. A distinguished scholar's downfall was also distinguished. Only the waitress here stared blankly at the back of the young man with a sword. For some reason, she suddenly felt her face heat up as if it was on fire. The young man, who was suspected to be the priest of the temple of the God of Heaven, left this private room. He did not need anyone to guide him. He walked around with familiarity and came to a private room. He pushed the door open and entered. There were many people sitting in the room. Judging from their attire, they were all wealthy and respectable. The young man in martial attire who had been drinking with him in the izakaya was also seated. When he saw him, he smiled and complained, "Everyone's here, but I don't see Brother Haruta. Where did you go just now? Did you run away from the wine?" The man with the surname of Haruta laughed. "Wine is the best medicine to save the world. Why would I run away?" He waved his sleeves and said boldly, "Fill it with me." There were already some tactful guests who filled his cup and invited him to take a seat. Among the people present, it was obvious that there were 3 people at the center. One was the man in martial attire. The other was the man with the surname of Haruta, and the third was a beautiful woman with picturesque features. She sat alone in the middle of a group of Japanese nobles. She did not appear to be weak at all. Instead, she was impossible to ignore. She opened her red lips slightly, and her voice was so soft that it tickled the heartstrings in people's hearts. Hirano-sama is truly a hero in wine. Every word and every sound made people's hearts tremble. It's not that I'm addicted to wine. Haruta raised his cup and downed it in one gulp. His eyes stared at the beauty without hesitation. "I just want to drink a little more. Perhaps, Miss Mayu, you can forgive me for being rash." What he had said to Jiang Wang earlier was not bragging. The people present were either rich or noble. Each of them had a say in Japan and had their own influence. However, he ignored all of them and did as he pleased. If he wanted to come, he came. If he wanted to drink, he drank. If he wanted to flirt with the beauty, he flirted with the beauty. The others did not feel offended at all. They all had smiles on their faces. They were sensible and considerate. No one disturbed them. Under Haruda's extremely oppressive gaze, Mayu chuckled softly. That sound seemed to float in the air, lingering and delicately drilling into people's hearts. She smiled and said, Hirano-sama is the son of God. Your fortune is unparalleled. Your every move is tied to 1,000 pounds. Those who enter are noble, and those who leave are heroes. How can you say that I'm rash? These words praised Haruda to an extremely high level. She gently and softly dispelled his flirting. It made people unable to vent their anger. Haruda looked left and right and smiled. Look at Miss Mayu. She's so good with words. However, that oppressive attitude had already been restrained. Everyone agreed. One praised Haruda for being honorable, while the other praised Mayu for being considerate. After 3 rounds of wine, the man in martial attire pressed down with both hands. Everyone knows the purpose of Miss Mayu's visit to Japan this time. Whether or not we can do this business, and how we can do it, we need to have a definite answer as soon as possible. Time waits for no one. Everyone is busy. Mayu's soul-stirring eyes turned slightly. I'm unfamiliar with this place. Please take care of me. No. Just as a middle-aged man started to speak, Haruda interrupted him. Today, we're not talking about business. If we want to drink, let's drink. The man swallowed his words without any indignation and even added a bright smile. Mayu saw everything, but she smiled gently and said, Hirano-sama is right. Today, Mayu's banquet was supposed to be a small gathering between friends, but when it came to business, it became tacky. How about we talk about the scenery of Japan? Let Mayu see a thing or two and know what kind of scenery can nurture the spirit of a ruler. She clearly came with the heavy responsibility of Fragrant House, but she didn't seem anxious at all. On the contrary, she seemed more indifferent than the locals of Japan. It was as if this matter wasn't important. Everyone present secretly exchanged glances. Each of them had their own plans. Of course, Haruda didn't care about these things. He really didn't care. He said excitedly, only when the scenery of Japan is pleasant can it attract beautiful women to visit. Speaking of which, I just met an interesting guy who is also a foreigner. Chapter 788. What? You've already set off? In the Star River Pavilion in the Great Illusionary Land, Chung Gung-sheng was surprised. Aren't you going to spend more time with Little Inen? The two of them had been communicating with each other intermittently through letters. Because they were both busy, they rarely wrote to each other. It was the first time they met in the Star River Pavilion. What? Jiang Wang joked. You don't welcome me on behalf of Qi? You're the man of Qingyang Town, the rank 4 blue medal arrester, the famous De Qi Tianjiao. I don't want to welcome you, but you represent Qi better than I do. Chung Gung-sheng smiled, but there's nothing much going on in Linzi recently. Qingyang Town is doing well. Your little maid has been trained, and our Dushing Trading Company is making a lot of money every day. You should spend more time with Inen. After all, she's still young and needs company. I'd like to, but if I stay in Cloud Tower now, I'll just cause trouble for them. Jiang Wang sighed helplessly and recounted what had happened during this period of time. Chung Gung-sheng looked at him strangely. You sneaked into Zhuang City and killed their vice minister when Zhuang Yong was at war. Although your summary seems a bit awkward, you can understand it that way, Jiang Wang said. Vice minister is nothing. I killed Taizu. Of course, he had to keep it in his heart and was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Then how did you run away? Isn't your monarch Zhuang Gaoxian a perfected person? I've looked through the intelligence of the Western region before. Didn't he kill Han Yin? That means he's very powerful among perfected persons. The fat man narrowed his eyes. Your father-in-law made a move? He was far away in the Qi territory in the Overlord country, so he didn't need to care about the Western region. He deliberately looked through the intelligence of the Western region because of Jiang Wang. But when he talked about it, he insisted on being sarcastic. What are you talking about? Jiang Wang rolled his eyes at him. Chung Gung-sheng was even more anxious. You're still pretending in front of me. I didn't say that I was saving your face. Do you think I don't know? He even said that he was going back to see his younger sister. I've seen you write to High Heaven Pavilion's young miss several times. Jiang Wang was too lazy to argue with him. He said directly, Zhuang Gaoxian did make a move, but the one who saved me was not Pavilion Master Yi, but Master Kuju. The one who told you that he wanted to take me as his disciple. The little monk you bullied in Qingyang town last time is his disciple. Bully me? Cheng Gengsheng's attention was indeed diverted. Is that stupid monk's master that strong? Can he withstand Zhuang Gaoxian? Jiang Wang was a little speechless. You scolded her like that back then. Didn't you investigate it afterwards? Then, one thing after another happened, so I forgot about it. Cheng Gengsheng was also a little embarrassed, but he quickly erased it. Why did he save you? Do you have such a relationship? He came to take me as his disciple, Jiang Wang said faintly. Ugh. Cheng Gengsheng was stunned. How persistent. He thought for a moment, then became serious again. You are a person who values loyalty. You believe in repaying kindness and hatred. The old monk saved you again. You can't help but be grateful. There are some things that you might not like to hear, but I still have to say them. As the saying goes, one who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Since he has the strength to stop Zhuang Gaoxian and has the foundation of Xiankong Temple, he can take any kind of disciple. Why is he so persistent about you? Have you ever thought about this? I have thought about this question, but I have no clue. Jiang Wang thought for a moment, then said, maybe the world is not only about interests. Maybe fate? Naive. Cheng Gengsheng scolded. Then he added, of course, there may be exceptions. But if you always think that you can meet an exception, then you are too naive. Let me ask you, why do you make a Jinren like you so much that he has to take you as his disciple? He asked aggressively. Are you more talented than others? Are you a good person? How great is your willpower? Have you done something that no one else can do? Speaking of this, he suddenly stopped. His tone was a bit helpless. Well, although I don't want to admit it, you do seem to be very great. If you analyze it this way, that old monk is clamoring to take you as his disciple. It seems quite reasonable. Even I want to take you as my disciple. He said, you should at least be a Zhenren before you have a nerve to say that. Jiang Wang, of course, understood the reminder in his laughter. He said seriously, I am not stupid. Don't worry, I will take care of myself. It is best that you know what you are doing. Cheng Gengsheng said. Then he suddenly asked, what is the scenery of the state of Japan? Not bad, Jiang Wang answered. Then he asked doubtfully, what's wrong with you today? What do you mean what's wrong? This doesn't seem like something you would care about. Is it? Cheng Gengsheng's expression was natural. I was just casually asking. By the way, are you going to Xiankong Temple to meet that old monk later? Brother Sheng. Jiang Wang looked at him seriously. Are you hiding something from me? What can I hide from you? You know everything about me. Fatty smiled mischievously. Jiang Wang's expression became serious. Looks like you are really hiding something from me. You know me so well. Cheng Gengsheng was helpless. Okay, I surrender. Actually, that brat Yin Fu was beaten up by the Huaying Palace Master. I just happened to see it. He told me to keep it a secret, so I didn't say anything. Jiang Wang didn't laugh. You will only tell this kind of thing happily. You won't hide it from me at all. Cheng Gengsheng, what happened? Jiang Wang had already called him by his name. This was enough to show his attitude. Cheng Gengsheng still only said, if you don't believe me, you can ask Jiang Wuyo later. Aren't you very close? She is standing up for her close friend. His expression and words were flawless. But Jiang Wang knew him too well. You don't have to say. Jiang Wang immediately stood up. I will go back to Qi as soon as possible. If there is anything, wait for me to go back and see for myself. Jiang Wang thought very clearly. If it was just Cheng Gengsheng's personal matter, Fatty wouldn't be so conflicted. Therefore, the matter that Cheng Gengsheng was hiding must be related to him, or even his own matter. He was in Qi. What else could happen? He didn't know, but he was very uneasy. Cheng Gengsheng rubbed his forehead and finally sighed. It's not that I want to hide anything from you. In fact, I have been conflicted about whether I should tell you or not. If it has something to do with me, I should know. It doesn't matter whether you should tell me or not. Jiang Wang looked at him seriously. Although you and I are close friends, you can't make the decision for me. Okay. Cheng Geng-sheng thought for a while and had to say, it all started with Hai Zoming. As one of the 24 elders with real power, Hai Zoming's death naturally caused Hai Zoming to react. But you are the cheese man from Qingyang town, and it was Hai Zoming who took the initiative to find you. The Qi, naturally have to protect you. No matter how powerful Hai Zoming is, it can't cause trouble to Qi. Do you still remember how you killed Hai Zoming? He asked. Jiang Wang was silent for a while. Something happened to Zhu Biqiang, right? She deliberately leaked Hai Zoming's whereabouts and was found out. Hai Zoming has already destroyed her cultivation and expelled her from the sect. On April 4th, she will be taken to the Tianya stage to worship the sea. April 4th, Jiang Wang silently thought about this date. Fortunately, there was still time. What is the Tianya stage? He asked. Hai Zoming is the most sacred and inviolable place. It is said that it is the place where their ancestors fished dragons. Every year, Hai Zoming will worship the sea at the Tianya stage, and Zhu Biqiang is only one of the chosen sacrifices. There are 44 people who will worship the sea with her. These people are all unpardonable criminals. Do you have a way? Jiang Wang asked. Even in Linzi, I can't do anything. In the coastal islands, I won't have any face. Cheng Gengsheng shook his head helplessly. If I can solve this problem, I won't have to be embarrassed and hide it from you at all. I see. Jiang Wang nodded and repeated, I see. P.S. Hateful Heart Demon was misspelled as Questioning Heart, which has been corrected. Because it is a character that has appeared many times, I have to say it. On the original Cheatin website, I can fix almost all the mistakes and omissions, but the pirated version can't be fixed at the same time. Chapter 789. The north wind whistled, and the clouds scattered. After ending his conversation with Cheng Geng-sheng, Jiang Wang left the great illusionary land and headed east without stopping. Whether it was out of friendship or the fact that Zhu Biqiang had risked her life to deliver information to him, allowing him to kill Hai Zoming, he couldn't just sit by and watch Zhu Biqiang be sacrificed to the sea. Because he understood Jiang Wang's personality, Cheng Geng-sheng hesitated to tell Jiang Wang about this. He didn't just get the news today. When he found out that Jiang Wang had already returned to Linzi, he accidentally stopped Jiang Wang. That was how Jiang Wang saw through his lie. He knew Jiang Wang's choice too well, but he also knew the difficulty of this matter. The Fishing Sea Tower was the undisputed overlord of the entire offshore archipelago. Their voice in the offshore archipelago was even louder than the state of Qi. The terrifying master of the Qi, the leader of the night watchmen, was ordered to retreat after taking a step out of the sea. Fishing Sea Tower's power didn't stop there. Zhu Biqiang had indeed broken the sect's rules and caused the death of a sect elder. No matter how innocent she was, she couldn't escape death if Fishing Sea Tower sentenced her to death. What Cheng Geng-sheng was thinking about for Jiang Wang would of course think about it too. But his choice wouldn't change. He walked straight ahead, not changing his path because of difficulties. On the 4th day of the 4th month, the Fishing Sea Tower held a sacrificial ceremony under the Tianya stage. It was the beginning of the 2nd month. There were still 2 months left for him to find a way to save Zhu Biqiang from a colossus like the Fishing Sea Tower. It was difficult, but he had to do it. 10 days. Jiang Wang used only 10 days to cross the central region from He State to Xingyue Plain. In the past, this was unimaginable speed. But after mastering one step to clear skies, it was relatively easy to complete. It was evening in Xingyue Plain. The sky was low and the clouds thin. He stopped here to recover and enter a state of cultivation. Guan Yin had said that Xingyue Plain was one of the places in the modern world closest to the Milky Way. This was also the only place Jiang Wang had found in the modern world that could store astral power for his totem. The bone lotus flower and the fire totem behind him had been cleverly connected by Qiming to form the scorching bone lotus. But internally, there had always been a clear divide. Jiang Wang stored the totem power he had obtained from practicing the fire origin graphic tome, while the bone lotus stored star power. Of course, because it was hard to obtain astral power now, the bone lotus was often empty. Thanks to the totem system of the void continent, Qing Hua Qiming had erased the possible influence of the god, which was how the fiery bone lotus had appeared. Due to some inexplicable change, the fiery bone lotus was able to absorb and store star energy. Jiang Wang's lack of reverence for gods was largely due to his experience on the floating continent. Apart from Creator Sky, the void continent didn't believe that gods existed. The only ones who existed were origin thieves and faith thieves. That sentence, God has me, and if there is me, there must be something private. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear it. Jiang Wang had stayed in Star Moon Plain to communicate with Master Guan Yin and accumulate astral power in preparation for his own attacks. But for some reason, he suddenly thought of Qing Hua Qiming in this place closest to the stars, the young shaman who had leapt into the remote heaven from the Wuji catacombs. Had he been dissolved by the remote heaven, or had he obtained true freedom in the remote heaven? Jiang Wang still remembered Qing Hua Qiming's last words before he leapt into the remote heaven. They were directed at him. There seems to be a voice calling out to me. Come from a blue sky. I am no longer afraid. He might have never had any friends, which was why he had only confided in Jiang Wang, whom he hadn't known for long. He was indeed no longer afraid of the remote heaven. He had devoted himself to it. Qing Hua Zhu, the shaman who had pushed the remote heaven to the final stage and was considered the strongest in history, had completely rejected the idea of the remote heaven before his death. However, Qing Hua Qiming, who possessed the remote heaven totem, had still jumped into the remote heaven. At the time, Jiang Wang had told Qing Hua Gaoqi that he hoped the changes caused by Qing Hua's leap into the remote heaven would lead to a good ending. But after the game of life and death, he had left the void continent. Had a good ending happened? Perhaps it had. After all, the Qing Hua tribe's victory in the game of life and death had allowed them to obtain the totem of royalty and rule the void continent for 100 years. Perhaps Jiang Wang watched the sky gradually darken. He suddenly felt that the night sky would look a lot like the remote heaven if the stars and moon were removed. What exactly was the remote heaven? Perhaps it was Zhu Biqiong's predicament that made the young man think of his friend on the void continent when he stopped. When the sky had completely darkened, Jiang Wang collected his thoughts and began absorbing astral power. The heavens, the earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars were always fair. Starlight sprinkled down evenly on every inch of land and bathed everyone. Relying on his understanding of astral power, Jiang Wang did his best to distinguish between the complicated stars and focused on absorbing astral power from Alioth. He didn't know how to contact Guan Yin, but he hoped that he could use this method to attract Guan Yin's attention in the forest ocean origin world. Although it hadn't been long since he left Star Moon Plains, he had experienced far too much and accumulated many cultivation questions. In fact, he didn't have anyone to ask. Experts who were on good terms with him, such as Chong Xian, Chu Liang, and Yi Ling Xiao, weren't that close. Ku Ju might not be stingy with his guidance, but he didn't want to be Ku Ju's disciple, yet he still wanted to be taught. Guan Yin, on the other hand, was very close, even though they hadn't interacted much. This wait lasted for 3 nights. Guan Yin didn't make a sound, but the bone lotus had more or less finished accumulating astral power. On the 4th night, Jiang Wang decided to leave at daybreak. It was still the first half of the night, but the bone lotus was already full of astral power. He made a mental note of this time. 3.5 nights was enough to fill the bone lotus. This meant that 3.5 nights was enough to store a terrifying trump card. Of course, it wouldn't be as powerful as the one in the game of life and death. Back in the Void Continent's Wuji catacombs, he had obtained pure astral power from killing star beasts and filled the entire fiery bone lotus. That was why he, who was in the soaring dragon realm, could defeat Lei Zhanxian with a single strike. Because totemic power was useful for cultivating the fire origin diagram, Jiang Wang had only vacated half of the fiery bone lotus. Naturally, the amount of astral power it had accumulated was only half of what it had been before. Moreover, this kind of astral power wasn't as pure as the astral power he obtained from killing star beasts, so it wasn't as powerful. Even so, this bone lotus was filled with astral power. At the very least, it could increase the offensive power of an inner palace cultivator with a divine ability. Or to put it in a more direct way, it should be on par with Lei Zhanqian, who had opened up 2 prefectures. As for Jiang Wang himself, many people said that his victory over Lei Zhanqian in the Yu prefecture was due to luck. Huaying Palace Master Jiang Wuyo also thought that his true strength was similar to Lei Zhanqian's. Lei Zhanqian's strength wasn't inferior, but his preparation was. But now, Jiang Wang believed that his true strength was enough to crush Lei Zhanqian. No matter how Lei Zhanqian prepared, it was useless. Of course, at this moment, Lei Zhanqian was no longer his target. If he had to find an opponent of the same level in Linzi City, the one he wanted to test the most was the one who had easily withstood his true samadhi fire. The 11th Prince, Longevity Palace Master Jiang Wuqi, who was favored by Emperor Qi the most. Of course, if Yun Genzuan hadn't become an outer palace cultivator by the end of the year, he also wanted to see what it meant to steal the limelight of one's peers. 300 miles of Linzi City, fish and dragons danced together. The more Tianjiao one was, the more one envied the wind and clouds. Thinking of those magnificent events, Jiang Wang suddenly didn't want to wait any longer. He stayed in Xingyue Plain for 3 days, but there was still no news. Perhaps Guan Yin just didn't want to see him. Then he wouldn't disturb him anymore. Jiang Wang stood up. But at this moment, he suddenly sensed that gentle voice. "Young friend, are you waiting for me?" Chapter 790. Senior. Jiang Wang was pleasantly surprised. He could clearly sense that Alioth's stellar energy had suddenly become much denser in a 30-meter radius around him. So much so that it temporarily pushed aside all other stellar energy. "Your improvement has amazed me," Guan Yin said. He was able to sense Jiang Wang's cultivation base through the contact of his astral power, even though they were separated by an unknown distance. Jiang Wang was both shocked and impressed. "My improvement is nothing compared to Grandmaster's. It's like comparing a firefly to the bright moon. How can I compare?" Guan Yin seemed to smile, and he didn't mind letting Jiang Wang sense his emotions through his stellar energy. "You're quite eloquent. You're flattering me." Jiang Wang was a little embarrassed. He felt that his flattery was a little too blatant and lacking in tact. He listened as Guan Yin continued. "The last time we conversed, I was already amazed by some of the questions you raised. Now that we've met again, you've become much better than before. You're truly a young hero. I'm just willing to work hard." Jiang Wang didn't think that he had the right to be arrogant in front of Grandmaster Guan Yin. "It's all thanks to your guidance that I'm no longer stuck in my own ways. Everyone understands the Tao first. I was just born a few hundred years earlier and took a few wrong paths to help you erase them," Guan Yin replied gently. "With your talent and comprehension, perhaps one day, I will also have to ask you for a favor. Last time, it was clearly one-sided guidance, but he took Jiang Wang's feelings into consideration and called it an exchange. He erased his own contributions and encouraged Jiang Wang's talent. Just like in the Forest Ocean Origin realm, Su Qiyun had been deeply moved and suggested that she prepare another set of resurrection materials to help Guan Yin and Grandma irritating meet again. It was already very difficult to gather all of Xiaoyu's resurrection materials. It was so difficult that even someone like Guan Yin found it difficult. It was almost impossible to gather 2 sets of resurrection materials. But back then, Guan Yin had only said, "I'll wait for you in this realm." Guan Yin's gentleness was something Jiang Wang had never seen in any other expert of his level. He was truly compassionate and merciful. No wonder Granny Xiao Fan was still thinking about him, even though her hair was already white. Jiang Wang said with a serious expression, "If that day really comes, as long as you ask, I won't dare to refuse." Even if it wasn't for anything else, just observing Yan's careful guidance that night was enough for him to remember it to this day. A person who had at least reached the divine descent realm. After the collapse of his physical body and the destruction of his divine soul, he used a bit of his true spirit to open up a new path. He was able to rely on the Aliyah star's power to communicate with the present world. What kind of amazing person was he? The careful guidance of such a person was so precious. It could be said that it had helped Jiang Wang avoid many detours. It was true that he had encountered many difficulties and enemies along the way. But at the same time, there were many people who supported and helped him. Guan Yin was one of them. Of course, it was not difficult for Guan Yin to judge Jiang Wang's sincerity, so he smiled again. Just like when you return my monk robe, he did not ask for anything in return and only kept his promise. Just like that, Jiang Wang said. Guan Yin said, "Okay." Without waiting for Jiang Wang to continue the topic, he asked directly, "You came to me specifically this time. Is there a problem that you're troubled by?" He was so considerate. Jiang Wang did not hesitate. He asked all the cultivation problems he had accumulated, one by one, according to their importance. Guan Yin was very patient. He answered them one by one until the sky was slightly bright. Only then did the guidance stop. Before leaving, Jiang Wang thought for a while and asked again, "Senior, do you know about the fishing sea tower?" "I have some impression of it," Guan Yin said. "It's one of the strongest sects in the coastal waters." "Why?" "Then do you know about the sea sacrifice?" Jiang Wang asked again. Guan Yin was silent for a while, probably recalling. "You shouldn't know about this now. I only heard about it from a few martial uncles in the past." Guan Yin's martial uncles were all eminent monks of the Ji generation. They were different from cultivators like Jiang Wang, who had no roots and no foundation. As the disciple of Xiankong Temple who had the best comprehension ability, Guan Yin naturally knew some secrets beyond his strength. Many times, it might be just a few words from the elders, but it was a secret that others would never know. Guan Yin continued, "This is a tradition of the coastal islands. The sacrifice to the sea is actually not for the sea, but for the heroic spirits who died in battle at the sea. And those who are sacrificed are usually evil people of the human race." "My friend is definitely not evil," Jiang Wang said. Guan Yin paused for a while and said, "After so long, I don't know if the traditions of the coastal islands are still strictly followed. So I can't make a judgment about your friend's character. For what you said, you want to save him?" "Yes, I must save him," Jiang Wang said. "If you want my advice is not to go." Guan Yin said, "The fishing sea tower has always been strong and domineering. In the coastal islands, their decision will not be swayed by your will." Jiang Wang only replied, "The will of the elders of the Forest Ocean Sacred Tribe will also not be swayed by you. Yin Shao is even more so." "But senior, have you stopped?" "I feel your attitude," Guan Yin said. Compared to this young man's trust in his friend, he actually believed in the traditions of the coastal islands more. As for Jiang Wang, he acknowledged him. But he was skeptical of Jiang Wang's friend, who was about to be sent to the sea. But Jiang Wang had already made up his mind. He knew very well what it was like when a young and passionate heart was determined. So he no longer tried to persuade him. "As long as you tell me some information, I will already be very grateful." Jiang Wang said, "You said that the coastal island's sacrifice to the sea is to honor the heroic spirits who died at sea. Who are those heroic spirits? Who did they fight with, and why are they called heroic spirits?" Guan Yin replied, "Although I have already returned to the secular world and am no longer a member of the Xiankong sect, the rules must be followed. But rules had to be followed, and traditions had to be respected. You should not know these things now." At this time, the morning sun was faintly visible on the horizon. In the gradually dissipating starlight, Guan Yin left behind his last words for the night. "I can only tell you to work hard and be more careful. You must know, do not go to sea without success." It was dawn. The plain of stars and moon was bright. Between heaven and earth, there was infinite light. This brilliant world that stretched as far as the eye could see. Jiang Wang was still sitting cross-legged on the ground, carefully digesting the information he had obtained from Guan Yin. Do not go to sea without success. What did it mean and why? Hadn't Su Xiangqian and Li Longchuan already gone to the coastal islands? They did not have outer building cultivation. And hadn't Li Fengyao already gone to the coastal islands? Perhaps time had passed, and some things had changed. The information provided by Guan Yin could not be used as a complete reference. After all, it had been several hundred years since Guan Yin was lost in the forest ocean origin world. Asking Guan Yin was only an impromptu idea to understand a little more. Cheng Sheng must have prepared more detailed information. Perhaps the only thing that had not changed in the past few hundred years was that the sea fishing tower was still domineering in the coastal islands and still held a dominant position. Even a direct descendant of the Xiankong Temple, like Guan Yin, said that the sea fishing tower was domineering. Even an overlord of the eastern domain like Qi had to be wary of the sea fishing tower in the coastal islands. Perhaps the sea fishing tower strength was far beyond his expectations. But so what? The young man still wanted to go to the other side and see the end of the world. The brilliant morning sun shone on Jiang Wang's face, making his facial features even more distinct. He gripped his sword, stood up, and walked forward step by step, rising higher and higher. The green clouds beneath his feet scattered, facing the morning sun, as if he was walking on light. Chapter 791. After leaving Xingyue Plain, Jiang Wang did not stop. Instead of entering Qingyang, he went straight to Linzi. Cheng Sheng waited outside the Exine Gate of Linzi's 108 city gates. There was a reason for him to choose this gate. When Jiang Wang came to Linzi for the first time, Cheng Sheng took him to the Exine Gate to remind the Jubao merchants that a man should keep his word. Later, when the Jubao merchants insisted on breaking their promise, Sushi refused to meet them. That was how Cheng Sheng came up with the idea of cutting his heart out outside the Qingshi Palace. The huge Jubao merchants collapsed like a landslide. Now, the Jubao merchants had long disappeared. Su Shi, who was once famous, had died in front of Jiang Wang. He had turned into dust. Now, Jiang Wang had returned as promised and was going to Xianyue Island for his friends. He was still at the Exine Gate. A believer is a man of his word. His words must be carried out, and his actions must be carried out. When Jiang Wang walked over from the end of the official road, he once again arrived at the towering Linzi city. He saw that familiar fat figure in front of the city gate, as well as 14th, who was still wearing his heavy armor behind him. Even though the journey was tiring, even though he was worried about Zhu Biqiong, he still smiled. "What are you waiting for?" he asked from afar. 14 was still a man of few words. He hid under his heavy armor and stood there like a statue. He only raised his hand. Cheng Sheng smiled and squinted his eyes. Compared to the first time he came to Linzi with Jiang Wang, his power in Linzi was different from before. He had basically eaten up Yung Ganzuin's share of the business. Only some unshakable foundations were left. Unless Yung Ganzuin completely withdrew from the fight for the position of clan leader, they would follow Yung Ganzuin forever. Just like Cheng Sheng's Dashing Trading Company, Chongshuan Shadow Guards, and 14. As one of the top nobles in Linzi City, Cheng Sheng only brought 14 to welcome Jiang Wang. Between them, there was no need for any extravagance, and there was no need for the effort of saving face. After the battle with Wang Yiwu, the whole of Linzi knew that Jiang Wang would support Cheng Sheng at any time. Cheng Sheng would also support Jiang Wang. "I'm waiting for you," Cheng Sheng said. He took a step forward. Before the new year, Wang Yiwu's assassination attempt failed and was defeated by Jiang Wang. Murderous Zhongshuan Chuyang also stepped forward. The two marquises of the Zhongshuan family joined forces to pressure the Grand Marshal of the state to seek justice. In the end, Wang Yiwu was sentenced to the death row prison camp and was not allowed to return to Linzi for 3 years. The competition between Cheng Sheng and Yung Ganzuin came to an end. Cheng Sheng won a complete victory. He sent Yung Ganzuin to Jixia Academy and chased Wang Yiwu out of Linzi City. Many people did not know that he was the mastermind behind the collapse of the Jubao merchants. No one doubted that Chung Gung-sheng had the qualifications to compete with Yung Gunzuan. However, Yung Gunzuan, who had yet to make an official move, was still Chung Gung-sheng's biggest obstacle. After Jiang Wang left, Chung Gung-sheng did not pay attention to the outside world and focused on cultivation. It was obvious that he was working hard to reduce the gap between their cultivation levels. Many people were waiting to see when Chung Gung-sheng would complete the Soaring Dragon Realm and open the Inner Palace. They wanted to see what kind of divine ability he would obtain. However, Chung Gung-sheng was not in a hurry. He stayed in the Soaring Dragon Realm and polished himself again and again. Gradually, there were rumors that his potential had been destroyed by Wang Yiwu, and he had lost the possibility of obtaining a divine ability. Was that why he was unwilling to open the Inner Palace? Otherwise, why would Xiong Tu be so angry and go against the army god when nothing major had happened to him? The rumors became more and more intense. Chung Gung-sheng did not respond and only held on to his power and cultivation. Today, all the rumors would be dispelled. This was because Chung Gung-sheng's aura had skyrocketed when he took a step forward. Once the Tao Meridian turns into a dragon, it flies out to sea. When it sees the 5 wheels of light, it slashes open the heavens and earth. This nameless poem, passed down in the cultivation world, described the splendor of advancing to the Inner Palace. From the heavenly sea to the 5 prefectures sea, the dragon leaps and the Inner Palace opens. In the Heavenly Palace secret territory, Chung Gung-sheng had already decided on a divine ability. At this moment, he took a step forward and his aura skyrocketed. Suddenly, he stood up, and his already plump body suddenly swelled up and began to swell. 1 zhang, 2 zhang, 3 zhang. His expanding body caused the people near the city gate to exclaim. The city walls of Linzi City were 33 zhang tall, and Chung Gung-sheng's body was almost half the height of the city. He was almost 150 zhang tall. Divine ability, lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. This giant stood outside Linzi City. He took a big step forward and reached out to grab Jiang Wang. His voice was as loud as thunder, shaking the clouds in the sky. A friend from afar has come to greet you. A big hand covered the sky and the earth like an upside-down mountain. Probably because he hated Jiang Wang for being so aggressive in the great illusionary realm, he challenged him again and again. Chung Gung-sheng did not discuss this with him in advance. However, Jiang Wang was not surprised and only said, "Good." He stepped on the green clouds and calmly escaped from Chung Gung-sheng's palm. The green clouds gathered and scattered in the sky. 1 step away from the palm, 1 step closer to the giant's body, and 1 step closer to the giant's head. Every strand of this giant's hair was as thick as a python. They were tangled together and tied into an ugly bun. At this moment, they were piled up in front of Jiang Wang, thick and heavy. Chung Gung-sheng's bun was usually taken care of by 14. However, 14's talent was obviously in the heavy sword. His attainments in hair tying were mediocre. Jiang Wang laughed loudly. "It's been a long time since we last met. I'll fix this messy hair for you." Chong Si Tsong Sheng was unsheathed, and a cold light flashed. "Good brother, you can't do this." Chung Gung-sheng shook his body and shrank rapidly, returning to his original appearance. The treasured clothing on his body was safe and sound as he shrank. Jiang Wang sheathed his sword and landed. He seemed to be smiling. "Are you done with your greetings? It's not convenient to show off here. Shall we go back to the usual place?" Chung Gung-sheng did not reply. He only laughed. "Let's go to Qingxin Villa. I'll hold a welcoming dinner for you." Qingxin Villa was a small tea house operated by Chung Gung-sheng. It was not open to the public. When Jiang Wang set off for the 7 Stars Mystery Realm, a group of friends from Linzi sent him off here. Jiang Wang was a little surprised. With Chung Gung-sheng's usual habits, he did not hold a banquet at the House of Red Sleeves or any other famous brothel. However, he did not say anything. He had no attachment to brothels and brothels. He just needed a place to talk to his friends. Anywhere was the same. Chung Gung-sheng led the way and swaggered into the city. He looked like a hedonistic son of a wealthy family who was tyrannical in a remote town. When he fought with Jiang Wang just now, they did not use their full strength. Jiang Wang did not use his divine abilities, and he did not use his heavy techniques. He only wanted to display his divine abilities in Linzi. For someone as smart as Cheng Gongsheng to choose the day of Jiang Wang's return to pluck his divine abilities, he naturally had his own considerations. It was not a simple whim. If such a shocking divine ability was displayed in Linzi City, Bea would immediately treat him to a meal. There was no such consideration outside of Linzi City. The more imposing and awe-inspiring it was, the better. The lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was undoubtedly a powerful divine ability. It was enough to shut up all the mouths that doubted Cheng Gongsheng's cultivation potential. He knew very well what Jiang Wang wanted to do in Linzi this time. Therefore, who was used to hiding his strength and biding his time, and scrupulously displayed his talent and future. Because he wanted to mobilize his resources to the greatest extent. Chapter 792. Giving enough resources and respect was something a person in power should do. However, if one wanted to gain more support, it was more important to convince people that they had a bright future ahead of them. One had to become a better choice so that more people would choose them. This was the reason why Cheng Gongsheng had displayed the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. In terms of management, he had already surpassed many people and was definitely not inferior to Yung Genzuan. What he wanted to prove now was that he also had enough talent to become a powerful, transcendent cultivator. This way, he would be able to obtain more Zhengenjia resources to help Jiang Wang influence the outcome of the sea sacrifice ceremony at the fishing sea tower. He had already tried to dissuade Jiang Wang. He had also tried to hide it. However, since Jiang Wang had made up his mind and rushed back to Linzi in such a short time, he had no other choice but to support him without reservation. Jiang Wang walked behind Cheng Gongsheng. The lively scene of the bustling crowd reawakened his memories of this great city. On the streets of Linzi City, there were basically no hedonistic sons of rich parents who bullied men and women. This was because there were too many dragons lurking in the bustling heart of the Deqi Empire. A stone thrown down could hit 7 or 8 high-ranking officials and 3 or 4 lords. No young master dared to say that he could act unscrupulously in Linzi City. Therefore, Cheng Gongsheng's arrogant swagger at this moment was particularly eye-catching. However, he happened to be one of the few sons of rich families who could act arrogantly in Linzi. Compared to when he first came to Linzi from the Chongqing clan, he was almost like a completely different person. However, this was what Cheng Gongsheng wanted people to see and know. He wanted to confirm his advantages and let people understand that he was the future head of the Zhengenjia clan. Jiang Wang felt a little awkward following this fatty through the streets, but he could still bear it. After all, he was somewhat used to it. It was just that 14 glanced at him from time to time, which surprised him. 14 never spoke. Initially, he even thought that the black-armored warrior was a mute. Later on, after they got to know each other better, they only nodded as a greeting and rarely spoke. "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with me?" Jiang Wang asked. 14 did not stop, and the armor on his body clanged. After a long silence, he finally said, "His hair is not messy." Jiang Wang looked at Cheng Gongsheng's hairbun and realized what he had said. He hurriedly added, "It's not messy indeed. I was just talking nonsense when we were sparring. This hairpin is well organized, and each strand is well fitted. It's a top-grade hairpin." 14 obviously wasn't as thick-skinned as Cheng Gongsheng. After receiving this compliment, he immediately turned his head away in embarrassment. "Hey, Brother Wang." Cheng Gongsheng, who was swaggering about the matter, suddenly turned his head and said, "Why are you so glib-tongued after a long trip? Is the blue metal mission that tough?" After being reminded by Cheng Gongsheng, Jiang Wang suddenly remembered that when he left Qi, he was given the mission of a blue metal arrester, which was to hunt down the killer from hell. He still had to go to the northern Yamen later. However, compared to that, Chongqian Fat's sudden criticism surprised him more. He thought for a while, looked at Chongqian Fat, then at 14, then at Chongqian Fat. He suddenly understood why the welcoming party was held at Qingxin Cottage. Maybe not only this time, but also in the future, Cheng Gengsheng would not have the opportunity to invite him to such a good place as the House of Red Sleeves. "What are you looking at from the back?" Cheng Gengsheng grabbed him and said, "Come to my side." 14, who was wearing armor, walked on his right side silently. He pulled Jiang Wang to his left and separated them with his huge body. Jiang Wang let him pull him, but he just laughed and said nothing. Cheng Gengsheng was obviously angry and said fiercely, "Tell me, didn't Xiao Yanjun prepare anything for you on this trip to Linzi?" Xiao Yanjun was a famous woman in the history of Qi. She was famous for her wealth and generosity. It was said that when she got married, she used an entire street in Linzi City as her dowry, marrying an ordinary boy in the eyes of many. That was a street in Linzi City. People in Qi often used Xiao Yanjun's marriage to describe the situation of women being rich and men being poor. Jiang Wang had been in Qi for a long time, so he naturally understood what Cheng Gengsheng was mocking. It was nothing more than repeating the old story and claiming the relationship between him and Yi Qingyu. However, he laughed even more happily. "Why do I hear a hint of guilt in your question?" Jiang Wang felt that he rarely had the upper hand in words, so he couldn't help but be excited. He was about to strike while the iron was hot. 14 on the side suddenly said, "We're almost there." Her voice was actually very soft, but it was inexplicably like a heavy sword cutting down and breaking mountains. Jiang Wang shut his mouth embarrassedly, although there was still a distance and they weren't there yet. 14, who didn't like to talk, was forced to take the initiative to talk. If he continued, he might be beaten up, right? Qingxin Villa. 14 was still standing in the corner of the room with a sword as usual. If one didn't know her well and hadn't heard her talk, it was hard not to think that she was a statue. The black armor on her body looked heavier, although it was also an excellent armor. Obviously, it couldn't reach the height of the carrying mountain, not even the damaged and repaired carrying mountain. However, the light of the heavy sword was restrained, which looked extraordinary. It was obvious that it was made by the weaponsmith of the Lin family at a high price. Because of Lin Kei's relationship, this sword couldn't be too bad. Of course, it couldn't reach the quality of Sauvignon yearning either. After all, famous weapons were hard to come by. Jiang Wang and Cheng Gengsheng sat opposite each other. Here, they didn't tease each other anymore, but directly talked about business. As early as in the Great Illusionary Land, they had a tacit understanding. Jiang Wang started a hurry, while Cheng Gengsheng collected all kinds of information without a doubt. Because they didn't have much contact before, they knew too little about the offshore islands. "I heard people say that don't go to the sea if you don't succeed. What does it mean?" Jiang Wang asked first. "It seems that you've collected a lot of information. You're really concerned about that Zhu guy." Zhongxian Sheng glanced at him, but did not start any verbal ridicule, nor did he ask him where he got the news. He probably thought that he got the information from the Lin family or the Blue Metal Constable. So he said seriously, "This has something to do with the sea sacrifice I'm about to tell you. I was only qualified to know some information after I took over part of the family's power. What you said has a history of many years, and it's still applicable today. Going to the sea doesn't mean leaving the coast of the Qi. It means the vast sea outside the offshore islands." "The sea?" Jiang Wang thought. "What's in the sea?" "The sea's marine race." The vastest and only known sea in the modern world was east of the Qi. It was called the sea. Song meant the granary of water. It naturally produced food and nurtured countless lives. It was a word that showed its greatness. "No." Cheng Gengsheng shook his head. "It's the marine race. The marine race and the marine race are completely different. The marine race is our friend, and the marine race is our enemy." Chapter 793. The Sea Race. Jiang Wang, who grew up in the western region, had never heard of this term. He had even heard of the demon race, which was rarely seen in the modern world. He had also seen them in the beast layers of the Sioux Empire and knew the significance of the Meridian unlocking pill. He had also heard of and seen demons, and even the true demon Song Wanshi had fallen into the myriad world's desolate tomb right in front of him. But the sea race was really unfamiliar to him. Chung Sheng smiled bitterly. It's not just you. I was born in Xi, and I was as unfamiliar with the sea race as you are. He asked, you should know what the event that marked the end of the Middle Ages was, right? The Tao Academy has talked about this part of history. I remember it was the human emperor chased the dragon emperor. Jiang Wang paused here. The dragon race? The sea race? Chung Sheng sighed. At the end of the Middle Ages, the human emperor Lai Shan exiled the dragon emperor, and the dragon race disappeared from the world. After the late ages, all information about the dragon race disappeared. Have you ever wondered where the dragon race went? The dragon race never disappeared. They have always wanted to return to the modern world. The sea race was originally a part of the sea race that was loyal to the dragon emperor. In the Middle Ages, the sea race was divided in the war between the human emperor and the dragon emperor. One part allied with the human emperor and was still called the sea race. The other part retreated to the sea with the dragon emperor and was called the sea race forever. In the beginning, the sea race and the sea race only had different names and different standpoints. But as time passed, the roots of their races had changed. Now, the sea race is the sea race, and the sea race is the sea race. They can no longer be confused. Jiang Wang listened carefully. So, the sea race is the descendant of the dragon race, and part of the sea race of the Middle Ages? You can say that. Chung Sheng nodded in agreement. But maybe they also merged with some of the original races of the sea race. It's just that I don't have enough information to confirm it. Has the sea race always existed? Jiang Wang asked. Then why is it that almost no one in the eastern region has ever heard of it? Why do you think Qi is great? Why can it dominate the eastern region? Why is it the strongest country in the world? Chung Sheng said slowly. Because the Qi army is guarding the sea, the human world has not heard of the Sea Clan for thousands of years. Jiang Wang was filled with deep veneration. Just like how the armies of Jing and Mu guarded the desolate border and blocked the demon wave. For so many years, the Blue Sea has been at war. I was only able to find out about this because I specially searched for information on the sea and obtained some authority. Chung Sheng was also lamenting, I've often wondered why the Qi-9 soldiers had to be so careful when they wanted to take over the Yang Kingdom. They had tried for so many years to no avail, but now it's up to me, a junior, to push for it. I always thought that it was because of Jing country and Mu country. Now I know that it's mainly because most of the elites in Qi are being held back by the merfolk. Jiang Wang said suspiciously, if there's a large army fighting in the sea all year round, then the sea race shouldn't have hidden their information so well. Once the army is mobilized, there will be tens of thousands of them. How can everyone keep this a secret? This is related to the other problem you mentioned. Don't go out to sea if you don't succeed. Chung Sheng nodded. Between the Blue Sea and the Coastal Sea, there's a boundary called the Bewildering World. It's the main battlefield between the human race and the sea race. There, the sky is night, the sea is dark, and the north and south cannot be seen. Only powerhouses above the outer building realm can enter that battlefield. Without the guidance of the Starlight Sacred Tower, they'll definitely get lost in the sea. That's why there's the saying, don't go out to sea if you don't succeed. The existence of a sea race has never been truly hidden. It's just that they've never been open to cultivators below the outer building realm and ordinary people. This is the responsibility of powerhouses. It's also the protection of those who stand at the peak of cultivation for those who come after them. All cultivators above the outer building realm into Qi have to go out to guard the sea. They can only be replaced if they kill the sea race or if they've been guarding for long enough. As for cultivators below the outer building realm and ordinary people, they can live in the beautiful imagination of the peaceful sea. This makes me respect them, Jiang Wang said. In that bewildering world where the sky is night, the sea is dark, and the north and south cannot be seen, Powerhouses above the outer building realm of Qi fought every day. Was this the responsibility of a powerful country? The world was constantly showing its complexity and changeability. On the one hand, a small country like the Sioux country hated the plundering of the Qi to the core. On the other hand, a small country like the Sioux country could survive because of the Qi's protection of the sea. At this moment, Jiang Wang remembered what Guan Yin said. The sea sacrifice of the islands near the sea was to pay tribute to the souls of the heroes who died in battle. If those people died fighting against the sea race, they were indeed worthy of the title of heroes. Thinking of this, Jiang Wang asked again, did the sects in the islands near the sea also participate in the war against the sea race? This is a question left behind by history. Cheng Gung Sheng explained, you know about the 9 sunrise nations. There aren't many of them left now. Their predecessor was the overlord of the eastern domain, the Sioux country, known as the Sunrise Nation. Back then, the Sioux country was extremely prosperous but declined. When it was destroyed, the sea was almost lost. The sea race invaded and attacked the coastal waters. All the knowledgeable people in the world spontaneously went to the coastal islands to help guard the islands. According to records, at most 2,300 cultivators crossed the sky and rushed to the sea in one day. Countless people died in battle. In the end, they resisted the attack of the sea race. Many of the surviving cultivators stayed in the coastal islands. With the passage of time, the sects in the coastal islands today were formed. They represented their ancestors to guard the sea forever. Imagine that scene. The overlord of the eastern domain was destroyed, and the sea lost its protection. The sea race rushed through the bewildering world and attacked the coastal waters, wanting to return to the real world. Countless cultivators came from all over the world. They crossed the sky and rushed to the sea. Every transcendent cultivator had to go through a long and arduous cultivation. They had to overcome many obstacles before they could climb to the peak and finally transcend. But when the sea was in danger, transcendent cultivators came spontaneously. Not just one or two, dozens, hundreds, and thousands. At most, 2,300 cultivators went to the sea in a day. How could the sea race not be suppressed when all the cultivators in the world were like this? If Zhuguanglia had shown Jiang Wang extraordinary strength, extraordinary courage, and extraordinary compassion, then Jiang Wang had seen Zhuguanglia's strength. Then the history described by Cheng Gung Sheng let Jiang Wang see the responsibility and commitment of transcendent cultivators. Was the fishing sea tower also established at that time? Jiang Wang's voice was a little dry. No, the history of the fishing sea tower is longer than that group of sections. Long before all the cultivators in the world went to the sea, the fishing sea tower was at the forefront of guarding the sea. Even the sacred ground of the fishing sea tower and the Tianya platform faced the bewildering world. Cheng Gung Sheng also sighed. Before you decided to go back to Linzi, I told you that there was no way to save Zhu Biqiang. At that time, I didn't understand the situation of the coastal islands, but after I understood, I could only say so. Sometimes the most difficult thing to deal with was the greatness of the enemy. If the fishing sea tower was equivalent to Hai Zongming, greedy, vicious, and cunning, he could do anything to destroy the sea sacrifice of the fishing sea tower and save Zhu Biqiang. But it just so happened that the fishing sea tower had a glorious history, and it was still holding on to its glory after so many years. How could he deal with it? Chapter 794. In the Qingxin hut, Cheng Gung Sheng continued to talk about the history of the sea fishing tower. Most of the existing sects in the offshore islands were newly established after the Battle of the World going to the sea. Before that, almost all the sects on the sea were destroyed by the attack of the Sea Clan. Only one sect was an exception. Cheng Gung Sheng thought for a moment and said, "No, to be precise, there should be two." "Which two?" Jiang Wang asked. "One is Magio, and the other is the sea fishing tower." Magio? Jiang Wang already knew about the sea fishing tower. and the name Maggio was hard not to associate. In the myth, the place where the sun rose was called Maggio. The huge overlord that once unified the eastern region was also named Yang. In the northwest, it stopped at the endless quicksand. In the southwest, it stopped at the Sword Peak Mountain of the state of Great Xia. In the west, it entered the central region and competed with the state of Jing. At that time, the state of Great Xia was like the sun in the sky. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the state of sunrise. Strictly speaking, the offshore islands used to be the territory of the state of Great Xia. The reason why I've changed my view of this sect is because, as a sect, it was indeed established after the battle at the sea between all the cultivators in the world. But its history of guarding the sea border is far longer than these years. Cheng Gung Sheng said seriously, its predecessor was an army of the state of Great Xia. The history of guarding the sea border is almost as long as that of the state of Great Xia. But when the state of Great Xia was on the verge of destruction, the last Great Xia emperor wantonly mobilized the army and staged the final madness. Only this army refused to return to the capital, because they believed that compared to the glory of the state of Great Xia, they had something more worthy of protecting, and that was the peace of the human race's sea border. It was because of this army, the sea fishing tower, and the defense of the original sects in the offshore islands that the cultivators of the world could later go to the sea and drive the Sea Clan back to the bewildering world. But after that war, the sea border regained its peace. The commander-in-chief of that army killed himself with his sword. Because the state of Great Xia had fallen, the royal bloodline was cut off. As a general of the state of Great Xia, he felt that he had let down the country. After his death, the remaining people inherited his will and continued to guard the sea. They were all from the Mu Kingdom, but the Mu Kingdom had already been destroyed. Thus, they established their sect under the name Mu Valley, implying that they would always be at the place where the sun rises, carrying coffins and guarding the door, to show that we do not forget our homeland. Jiang Wang heaved a long sigh. It's moving. As for Fishing Sea Tower, Cheng Gung Sheng said, their history is even longer. It was said that the sea race had made a comeback during the calamity that swept through the near-ancient era. The ancestor of the Fishing Ocean Tower was overseeing the world's edge stage. Firmly guard the sea, one man, one pole, fishing the dragon from the horizon. That's why the whole world recognized the Fishing Sea Tower's rights in the offshore islands. Even when the Zhong state dominated the eastern region and looked down on the world, they never expelled the Fishing Sea Tower. One man, one pole, fishing the dragon from the edge of the world. How awe-inspiring and bold was this? It really makes one yearn for it. I wish I could see it with my own eyes. Jiang Wang sighed. Of course, this is only the legend of the Fishing Sea Tower. There's no historical evidence, so there's no way to confirm its authenticity. However, the Fishing Sea Tower has indeed made indelible contributions to the defense of the sea race for thousands of years. Cheng Gung Sheng patted his head lightly, seemingly having a headache. All in all, the Fishing Sea Tower has a glorious history, great contributions, powerful strength, and unparalleled influence in the offshore islands. It's almost impossible for you to change the sea festival that they've already set. My uncle does operate in the offshore islands, but we're not close. Secondly, the Zhongginjia's influence in the sea is really not enough. Even Chongji Island was recently exchanged from the Tian family, and they only have 10 years of development rights. Even if I bet all my chips, I still won't be able to stand at the same gambling table as the Fishing Sea Tower in the offshore islands. Cheng Gung Sheng's uncle, Chongxin Mingyi, was the fourth son of the old Marquis, Chongxin Yunbua. He spent most of his time developing overseas and rarely returned to Linzi. His third brother, Chongxin Mingshan, had died in battle, and a large part of the blame was on his second brother, Chongxin Mingtu. Therefore, he inevitably had complicated feelings toward Chongxin Mingtu's son, Cheng Gungsheng. He had never made things difficult for Cheng Gungsheng in all these years, but they weren't close either. The last time the two had contacted each other was because of Jiang Wang. When Cheng Gungsheng was gathering intelligence on Hai Zongming, he had specially asked him to do it. At that time, he didn't refuse. However, it was different this time. Zhongshuan Mingyi might not care about Hai Zhongming, and he was far away from the islands near the sea. This involved the entire fishing sea tower, so even if he wanted to, he was powerless. With Cheng Gengsheng's family background and Cheng Gengsheng's intelligence, it was almost impossible. This meant that saving Zhu Biqiong was indeed an extremely difficult matter. Jiang Wang trusted Cheng Gengsheng's intelligence more than anyone else and was certain of his judgment. However, he held his sword with both hands and placed it across his knees, saying, Zhu Biqiong was tortured for me. Without news of her, I couldn't have killed Hai Zhongming. His voice was very calm, and because of this calmness, it seemed even more resolute. Even if it's impossible, I still have to do everything I can. Cheng Gengsheng was silent for a long time before saying, It's useless for an ant to try to shake a tree. If you want to shake a tree, you have to borrow the wind. He didn't want to say these things. He didn't want Jiang Wang to do too much for Zhu Biqiong, but he didn't want to watch Jiang Wang take such a futile risk. After all, it was this kind of Jiang Wang, this kind of person who always kept his word, who valued friendship and righteousness, that had won his trust back then. Moreover, this kind of person had accompanied him until now. Therefore, he finally gave a suggestion. Mog Valley worked too hard in the bewildering world, so it's hard for their forces to develop. The other sects lack a foundation and even less prestige. Today, in the offshore islands, only Da Qi's voice can compare to fishing sea towers. However, Da Qi's voice is not yours or mine. You and I are far from being able to represent Da Qi. So who could represent Da Qi? With Jiang Wang's current status, he didn't have the right to meet the emperor at any time. They didn't even need to think about the emperor who could represent Da Qi the most. The other grand marshals and Da Qi's prime ministers were all the same. The only people he could come into contact with were the princes and princesses of the Jiang imperial family. A hopeless prince like Jiang Wuyong definitely couldn't do it. To a certain extent, only those palace masters had the right to speak on behalf of Da Qi. However, to the Zhonggenjia, getting close to a prince who wanted the throne was a very dangerous behavior. With Zhonggenjia's own strength and foundation, there was no need for him to support the throne. Therefore, Jiang Wang had to step forward himself. He asked him to do it in his own name. Cheng Gengsheng and the Zhonggenjia behind him wouldn't play any role in this. Then, this was the time to prove his personal value. In other words, it was the time to prove his value to the people of Qi. That kind of value might not be completely equivalent to Jiang Wang's own, but it would undoubtedly be more recognized and more convincing. For Jiang Wang's promise, who would be willing to pay? How much would be the price? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.